Excellent. And Janet, you can go ahead and introduce yourself and then kick us off with this video.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for being here. I am the Director of Education and Treks in Michigan Ross's FoodBev and Biz Club. So very excited to finally bring this to you guys today. And with that, I will cue up this video. Can you all see this video? Make sure I'm sharing the right screen.
Yes, I can.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Audio is good.
Hello, Michigan Food, Bev, and Biz Club. Welcome to our annual showcase. This year, we're doing an entire virtual event around entrepreneurialism in food. And as I'm sure future Steve has explained to you, our guests today are founders and executives of different food startups. Coincidentally, I've been quarantining with some of my very good friends here in Florida, watching them over the past month develop their own company to address one of the largest problems in our aquatic environments through food and through other market incentives. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my two friends that are going to kick off this showcase, Arav and Roland.
All right.
Say what's up, guys.
Hey, y'all.
All right, Roland and Arav, introduce yourselves and tell us what you were doing before you decided to start this company.
Yeah. So I'm Roland Salatino. Before this, I was working at Gallagher, which is a large insurance brokerage. I was a strategy and operations consultant. As awesome and fun as that was, I decided, you know what, it's time to take a jump and go into something new. I was actually about to go off to HBS, but then we had an idea for a startup, and we decided, you know what, now is the time.
You guys just jumped right in. That's
absolutely.
Awesome. How about you, Arav?
Well, I was just wrapping up a 3-year stint at consulting at McKinsey. Connected with this guy after a few years, and yeah, decided to jump right in.
You guys are really good friends from high school, right?
So, yeah.
Even before.
Before.
Since we were about 9 years old.
Just dreaming of fish.
From day one.
Yeah, for our viewers here, this startup focuses on one of the most invasive and dangerous predators our oceans have ever seen, called the lionfish. Roland, what's a lionfish?
Yeah, you nailed it, Steve. It is an invasive predator from Indo-Pacific waters that has been destroying our aquatic ecosystems. Every reef it touches kills 80% of life there.
80% of life?
Absolutely.
Wow. And we have some lionfish too, right?
Yeah, I can show you some if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold it up to the camera.
Here we go. All right. So this ugly, sometimes beautiful looking thing is a lionfish. You can see it's got venomous spines all over it. It's a monster. It'll destroy every bit of life that it can find.
Yeah, nature's way of saying don't touch.
Yeah, exactly.
And Roland, how did these fish become such a large problem for Florida and for other bodies of water as well?
Yeah, the leading theory is that they were pets that accidentally got let go into the ocean. And from there, these things have spread like wildfire. And now they've spread from Boston to Brazil, and they're even showing up in the Mediterranean.
So, as you said, 80% of life on coral reef, it decimates.
Yeah.
Doesn't have any predators? It doesn't have anything else to balance out that force?
Nothing here at least. It's those spines make nothing here want to eat it. And because it looks so weird, the fish that it feeds on they don't recognize it as prey.
Wow, okay.
As a predator.
So how do we stop them then? How do we catch them?
It's a tough question, Steve. And that's actually the toughest question that we've been trying to work with here, because you can't drop a line in the water. You can't drag a net because they hide in the reefs. We have to send people down hundreds of feet below the ocean surface to spear every one of them by hand.
These are guys, scuba divers with spears that these guys meet with on a regular basis. That is so cool. So that's where your company comes in. Arav, you are a big believer in market incentives. How does your company approach the lionfish problem?
So it's really interesting because a lot of the seafood that we eat today is as much determined by economics as it is by taste. So think salmon. It's a larger fish. The fish you saw was a small lionfish, but because they're smaller, we have to drive a little bit more value out of the fish in order to make it worth it for the divers to go down to the bottom of the ocean. I mean, scuba diving is expensive. It's fun. If you haven't done it, you need to. But it's really expensive. So we're looking at ways to maximize the value that we pull out of every single lionfish, so we can make it, make it worth it.
So that's the key. And how do you guys increase the market value of a lionfish?
A few ways. I'll call it a couple right now. I mean, one, a lot of people, because they have venomous spines, don't want to touch them. You probably don't want to get stabbed by them, and because you won't die. But people who do describe it as you wish you would have. So because of that, a lot of people don't want to handle it. So what we do is we try to process that risk out of the equation for them, so that we'd end up just giving them fillets that are safe to handle, no risk involved, no chance of getting envenomated. So that's one. Yeah. The second thing is that we're trying to actually play with the skin itself and turning it into other products that can, again, help drive up the value. In particular, we're playing with some of the larger ones. We can get a decent amount of actually leather out of it. Yeah. So fish leather is a little bit newer. It's a little bit up and coming. So we're playing around with getting this turned into fish leather.
Got it. So those are two angles, and it sounds like there's at least a somewhat decent market for lionfish fillets. But the leather is brand new, right?
Entirely new, yeah.
That's where you guys come in. So what stage are you at in making the leather component of the lionfish?
Across the board, we're very, very early. So, but in general, specifically on the leather, we've actually played with some prototypes. We've gotten some good brand feedback. We're iterating with them, and we're, pushing things along. So early feedback's been really positive. I mean, people like to engage with products, whether it's food or leather, that tell a really interesting story, and people like to feel like their actions and their decisions help the world. Yeah, because that's what we're doing here. We're creating products that if you buy, you're actively contributing to a cleaner, safer ocean. Yeah, there are very few products where you buy something and it is net positive for the world. I mean, a lot of places are trying to be net neutral, but this is one where you can actually be net positive. Great. And Roland, you and I have been at the startup for 4 months now. How are the problems that you're solving today different from the problems that you were solving 4 months ago?
In some ways they are entirely different. In some ways, some of them are still the same. I mean, things move so fast in a startup. The problems that we start with in the morning, we're already working on different ones by the end of the day. I mean, one of the big ones for us has been, supply chain, because this is a fish. Like I said, we have to go down and spear them all by hand. So that remains a big problem and a big nut to crack for this whole endeavor. In other ways, everything's changed just in 4 months. Like the entire landscape of where we started off, it feels so long ago. Just a simple, how do we break into this market? How do we start making the contacts? What are the other products you can make from a fish? Yeah, we've got so much more clarity on. We're moving on. Hell, we have actual leather prototypes.
Actual leather prototypes.
And it's bizarre to think about. These things, these ideas we started with are coming together and are real now. And so the problems have gone from, I wonder if we can actually make leather out of this thing, to where does this leather exist? What other things can we make? Where do these products have a home? And it's invigorating too. I can see it on both of your faces each and every day. The effort that you put into is actually driving forward a solution that is 100% your own. Absolutely. I mean, it's all been original. It's all been brand new. It is thrilling. We sleep and we dream about lionfish. At this point, I'm crazy. Not surprised at all. Arv, over the past 4 months, what's been the biggest thing that you've learned?
Learning how to experiment a guess, a hypothesis against a market is so much more valuable than kind of approaching something with a random kind of vision. So saying, okay, I think this is how the world could look like with lionfish leather, and actually taking that guess and throwing it at the market is actually really helpful, rather than saying, oh, let's build this guess out completely. Because there have been many things that we thought made sense and we've thrown it at the market, and the market's just like, oh, hell no. And some of them that we thought weren't really interesting, and some of them come back with, yeah, show me more. Got it. Roland, this next question is for you. In
in 5 years, where do you see this company? Because in 5 years, I can see how I want to interact with this company. I want to use my MBA salary and my MBA bonus to buy myself a diver's watch with some fresh lionfish leather on the wrist. But Roland, looking at your company, where do you want to take it in 5 years?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so much diversity and variety in terms of the products we want to be able to achieve. We see a lot of very interesting innovation coming in here, and that's one of the big things we are focused on is bringing creative approaches. And one of the biggest things that can lead to with this problem in particular is harnessing AI and robotics to really try to get underwater. And like we said, one of the big supply problems here is the fact that humans have to dive down and spear these fish in the head one by one. We think there may be some other solutions there that can make it much more cost effective to put these fish on people's plates and, like you said, on people's wrists with watches.
Wow. Well, you heard it here first, guys. 5 years from now, fish hunting robots and Steve wearing a Rolex. You heard it here first. Lightning round. Before we go, guys, I just want to ask you some really quick questions about the dynamic of your startup. First off, who is the most organized?
Who's that for, me or
Both of you. It's a lightning round. You guys got to jump out the answer.
I think it's ours.
I'm going to take that one, yeah.
All right, Ara's the most organized.
That's ours.
You see the sticky notes on the wall here in true startup fashion. Next question, who works the hardest?
Oh, I don't. We both work in different ways and throw a lot of energy and like, I don't know, we both recognize that there are certain areas where our energy is going to achieve a lot more.
What he's saying is he'll be up at 6 and I'll be up till 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can confirm having with these guys that's exactly how it works. Last question, who is the biggest liability to this company?
Oh my god.
It's gotta be Steve. It's Steve.
It's gotta be
really.
me.
It's you, man.
Setting the house on fire somehow, I don't know. All right, guys.
I'm
Well,
going to toss you under the bus.
well, thank you guys so much for kicking us off, introducing yourselves and your company to incoming class of MBA graduates who might have some inklings about what the food world could look like from their perspective, and are just looking for the jump, the push off the edge to just pursue it full time like you guys have.
All right.
So thank you guys so much.
Well,
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for talking to us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. All right, and stay tuned for more speakers coming up soon.
All right. Thank you, Janet. Kristen, do I have you in the audience?
Yes, you do. Hey.
Excellent. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So for our audience, Kristen Barnett is a personal friend of mine. She's been in the food startup scene for most of her life in New York City, a hotbed of food and technology innovation. She was one of the first employees at Dig, a company that promotes locally sourced produce across New York City. And now she's the chief operating officer of Zuul, a technology company that's providing an online platform for food delivery in the city. So Kristen, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I love the background, by the way, very floral. You're a professional here, not like
You
me.
can see how we've coped with the pandemic and a New York winter. Basically,
Yeah.
I've refused to accept that it's a snow globe outside, so we surround ourselves with plants.
So you bring the jungle, the summer jungle into the home.
Gotta bring the jungle to May.
Excellent. So Kristen, we were friends in high school. We were in the same high school class, had some of the same classes, and now you have the word chief in your job title. That's that's a pretty epic accomplishment. So we're really glad to have you here.
Thanks.
You went to Cornell and you majored in applied economics and minored in food policy. What was your favorite class that you took in college?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I really looked at my studies as a way to go more broad and understand a number of different subjects happening in the world. So While I was at Cornell, my favorite was probably this class I took on grocery stores. Cornell's business school is actually in the agriculture school. So there are a lot of cool classes. And this grocery store class was just really mind blowing to me as I better understood all these changes happening in the retail food sector, but also the fact that they brought speakers to the class. So it really was a great introduction to what these key executives at places like Aldi or Sam's Club or BJ's were thinking about. And that was probably my first foray into food as being a real potential career. And I just saw a lot of exciting things happening and a lot of cool problems to solve.
Awesome. Awesome. And then you did stints in consulting, investment banking. Did you ever anticipate that food would play such a large role in your career?
I totally thought food would be a later thing in my career. So I did a very traditional Cornell career path where summer intern at Barclays on the trading floor, and then went and worked at BCG after summer internship, and all of that was well and good. And I thought I would just kind of go down that road and then eventually maybe retire and have a specialty food store or something. I loved food, but again, it was going to be a later thing. So yeah, definitely didn't expect it.
Well, you've found the right path. You've been enlightened and you ended up in the right place.
Yeah.
So for me, one of the reasons I love food is that it tells stories. It's a part of culture. For you, food also means health and wellness. Can you tell us what the role food has played in your personal health journey?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, definitely didn't expect to work in the food industry, and really the reason why I do is because of some personal health struggles I actually have. So if any of you are from the Northeast, near where Steve and I went to high school in Massachusetts, you're probably familiar with Lyme disease, a disease you can get when a tick bites you. Well, I got bitten by a tick, but I didn't know it for a while. So I ended up developing chronic Lyme disease, and I've been struggling with this for the better part of the last 10 years. For me, I was doing like the traditional Cornell track, right? All my peers kind of reinforcing that was the right thing and it was the most important, whatever. But ultimately, management consulting was just completely unsustainable for me, having a chronic health issue. I mean, it's pretty unsustainable even if you don't, but like imagine having, an illness that impacts your brain function or your neurological function. And I really struggled with that type of lifestyle. So after about, the prior 6 years, I'd been on and off with a variety of more Western treatments. I was kind of desperate and I tried radical dietary change. And after about 20 days of a raw vegan diet, I went from barely being able to walk to walking with no pain. So needless to say, it was kind of a medical miracle. My doctors couldn't explain it. And I just really, while my friends are off partying, I was kind of grappling with like, what do I want to do? Like, I have this thing, it's going to be a struggle. I want to devote my brain power, my career into problems I really want to solve. And food's something I've loved. I don't know why I'm waiting. I'm just going to do it. So I quit BCG, found myself at Dig In, starting at the bottom, huge pay cut, but ultimately it was something I was really passionate about. And so that's how I landed where I am now.
Wow. That's breathtaking. And I'm so glad that you found health and wellness and your feet again after making such a personal change.
Yeah, thanks.
So yeah, tell me about that early experience at Dig In. What was that like?
It was honestly a really, really cool experience. I'm glad once I kind of got over the fact that I would be starting over again, in a sense, I just realized what an amazing opportunity it was to learn so many things. So started off when we were just about 20 people in a really cramped headquarters. I worked in a former closet that smelled like garlic every night because the neighbors would start cooking dinner, and it was just one of those wild, like, high growth experiences. The company tripled in size during the time I was there, and with all of that growth, even though I started off relatively junior, when a company scales that rapidly, there are naturally fissures that break open in an organization. Certain leaders are meant to be there for certain times of growth. And then as you navigate those next stages, there's a lot of opportunity to contribute in a variety of areas in the business. So that's exactly, what I had the fortunate experience of being able to do at Dig In. 8 months into the role, I was able to take over as the director of like supply chain and help reset our entire supply chain across the Northeast, working with local producers, visiting farms in Pennsylvania, negotiating huge contracts to buy like 20,000 pounds of broccoli a week. It was so cool. And then from there, it just took me on this journey. It's like a problem solving, like a maze of a career experience, which was awesome. It was basically raising my hand to solve problems. We were addressing food costs on the supply chain side, but I realized there was a problem with menu development. So I ended up taking over the whole product development team and running a team of chefs. And then from there, going even beyond that, fixing our pricing model, working on a number of like kind of co-branded initiatives between marketing, and then ultimately running the ghost kitchen and food delivery business that we started. So there was just a ton of opportunity. It was really fast paced, but you could almost feel myself like growing in those moments where I was like reaching beyond to the next level and just working really hard to get there and soaking up everything I could learn at the time.
Wow. And for our viewers, can you just quickly give a brief description on what Dig In's business model looks like? Because I know they do so many things.
Yeah, no, I mean, Dig In's a super cool company. I mean, it's known as Dig In. It rebranded to Dig in the last year or so. But Dig In's a fast casual restaurant chain similar to Sweetgreen, based in the Northeast. So fast casual, farm to table. Think about it as more of like grain bowls and that heartier food. And by the time I left, had about 35 locations in Philly, Boston, New York, Westchester, and was just growing like crazy. The business, is primarily that high volume Chipotle style model, and really, really focused on local sourcing as kind of the backbone of the company. So the company did some really interesting things. We ran a huge farm up in Chester, New York, to run a bunch of really cool specials. We, would source this, like Alaskan fish, salmon from like these fisher women. And we had this really cool beef partnership with this grass-raised cattle farm out in Oregon. So amazing initiatives. They were doing a lot of cool stuff.
Alaska salmon. That sounds exotic. That sounds fun.
I know. I wasn't running supply chain at that point. I missed that trip. So
it's too bad.
Like, yeah.
Well, field trip for next time. What was your biggest growth moment at Dig In, or Dig, excuse me?
I guess the biggest growth moment I had while I was there was that moment where I was about to start running the supply chain and didn't necessarily know whether I could or I would be. I had about 4 months of experience, and I realized that like the company was about to potentially take a huge chance on me. It was not obvious that me, junior, just came in 4 months. Like I was like really good at Excel. So I was like running all the reports and stuff. And I realized like there was a lot of important conversations I had to have to take on a leadership position or have the leadership team put that faith in me. And there were things I could do to demonstrate that even if I had a lack of experience, I still had the wherewithal to take on that position. Now, did I manage all of those conversations as I like rose through the ranks perfectly? No. But what I saw was a huge opportunity to always, do things in a consistent manner that gave people the confidence that even if you hadn't solved those problems before, you had a methodology and an approach to solving problems that could translate into perhaps a new area of the business. One thing I always went back to was I would first try to get to the data. I would clean it up, start to send out reports, create visibility, and then facilitate discussions around decision making for whatever key initiatives were going to pull those levers to impact the data. I never had all the answers. That much was true. I messed up so many times. Like I would just, forget to buy $5,000 of broccoli, and I needed to like get it in time for a training or whatever. I put crazy things on my corporate card those days. And I just learned the value, I guess, of that facilitative decision making, being able to manage up, being able to create the space with the right data to have that perspective that even if I didn't have all the answers, I had a path to getting there. And I'd say that was really critical to my roles over the years at that company.
Yeah, that's something that I think about a lot myself. The being a path maker, not necessarily having the answers, but being the most useful you can, and to make the answers apparent to others can help you kind of forge your own path. So that's great to hear. So what attracted you to Zuul?
Yeah, so Zuul, I mean, I don't know if I should give some background on Zuul and what we do, but
Sure, go right ahead. If you think that would be the best place to start, let's go for it.
I think it's important because it's really why I landed there. Zuul is a ghost kitchen company. So we currently operate out of New York, and we started off as a ghost kitchen infrastructure company where we managed a facility where many restaurants could cook side by side, delivery only brands. Think of it like we work for restaurants pretty much. A ghost kitchen, conceptually, I realize I should back up there, refers to the act of cooking food under a brand, but only for delivery. So you don't have a walk-in experience. People can't sit in tables. You're just selling food that's going to be delivered to apartments or, offices. So Zuul's a ghost kitchen company. Again, we started off as we work for restaurants, but then we ended up buying a tech company and building our own proprietary tech stack now, which we license as a SaaS product. So I'll go into more of that later. How I ended up there was and my last role, again, was actually running our ghost kitchen. We had just had a senior leader depart, and I stepped in to run our food delivery business and our ghost kitchen. We had realized that there was an opportunity to better utilize our real estate, namely this huge catering kitchen we had downstairs in one of our restaurants, as a delivery hub. So we actually went into that kitchen, cooked food under a different brand, and sold it for online ordering. Now, we also then met with Zuul at that time to discuss potentially entering their ghost kitchen. We ultimately decided not to move forward because we had so much real estate on our hands, with stores across all of New York. But I learned about what Zuul was doing. And so when I left Diggin that following summer to kind of take a break, start consulting for some really cool clients and figure out the next move, I was reconnected to Zuul and just knew that delivery and ghost kitchens is the future. I saw the data for Diggin over the years. Delivery was growing 20% year over year with zero investment in marketing. So I saw this trend just exploding and knew I had to be a part of it. So the opportunity with Zuul came up. I had to say yes. It was just really awesome to be able to work with the team kind of on the ground floor. Obviously, I could have never predicted what happened in 2020. So definitely was a case of right time, right place. And I feel fortunate for that in an industry that has definitely been so severely impacted by the pandemic.
That's an awesome opportunity to just open itself up, and perfect timing. And maybe just, again, for the purposes of education, providing a background, let's say that I am a restaurant operator or owner in New York City. Can you walk us through what challenges I might face, what options I might have, maybe Grubhub, Uber Eats, and how Zuul tries to provide a better option?
Yeah, of course. So this is what restaurants are thinking about, everywhere. So restaurants, obviously, with the pandemic, immediately about 75 to 80% of their sales just went, kaput. They're gone. So what they started to do was list on all of the food delivery platforms, like, as you mentioned, Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash. That's all well and good. And these, platforms came in promising incremental revenue and, you get your tablets for free and we'll set you up immediately. But what wasn't clear when they launched was really what the impact of the commissions that those platforms are, what they charge to the restaurants. Food delivery is not a profitable business, fundamentally, at least in its current shape. Moving one salad with one courier from a restaurant to a consumer, it's really hard to find an equation that works in a way that people get paid, because the consumer either has to pay exorbitant fees, the courier makes barely anything, and the restaurant ends up charged that 30%. All of this funded by, the venture capitalists, obviously, who just poured money into these startups to grab market share. And obviously DoorDash has really crushed it with a very successful IPO, but at what cost? And that's what I deal with every single day. The operators who are using these platforms and wondering why they're still not making money. And that's because of the commissions. So, and just for context too, a traditional restaurant's commission, 5 to 10%. So when so much of your revenue is coming from these platforms, it's really hard to make a good business, a good profitable business. So what does Zuul do? Well, as I mentioned, we started off as a ghost kitchen infrastructure provider. We had this facility, we opened it in September of 2019 and welcomed in our first class of members. But very quickly, what we saw was that exact phenomenon happening. Now that the restaurants didn't have walk-in sales, their most profitable, line of business didn't exist. So it unearthed that impact of the commissions. And we realized there had to be a better way. How could we build or help these restaurants build a delivery business that was more profitable? So we built out the Zuul Market technology and the Zuul OS kind of platform. And that's what we now are launching on, a regional basis in New York, but ultimately on a national scale this year. A restaurant operator who's cooking a lot of food for delivery is fundamentally who we're trying to help with this solution. Essentially, our platform can help them move sales from Grubhub and DoorDash and Uber Eats into ZOS through our demand partnerships we make with Zuul Market. It's I'm going pretty far in this, but really how it works. Yeah, no, really how it works is that, there's a whole new wave of restaurant operators on the market. These are people who are more digitally native and they're cooking a lot of brands out of their kitchens. They're a ghost kitchen. So what that means is they are either have many cooks cooking all these different concepts simultaneously, or they're one restaurant leveraging their kitchen, like what we did at Dig In, to cook different brands, making it a multi-brand business. That's who we really serve with Zuul OS. What we then realized we had the potential to do is if you have a multi-brand restaurant business, you can connect them with groups and better meet the needs of an entire group that want to order together. Primarily, we started by focusing on offices, but we realized there's an opportunity to even partner on a building-wide basis to offer a food delivery amenity. What we do on this side is we offer a white labeled website so that landlord or that office can brand their own online ordering experience rather than just telling tenants or employees to order off Grubhub or DoorDash and not be able to get any type of brand equity from providing a food delivery service. So we're that amenity. We bring them then this virtual food hall powered by the ghost kitchens who are on Zuul OS. And what we can do is create these batch deliveries that fix the problem of profitability in food delivery. So we can have a group of customers all ordering from a place that seems like many restaurants, but it's a ghost kitchen. They can order together, effectively moving a lot of product with one courier. So the restaurants don't have to pay as much for this delivery because the cost of the courier is spread across all those concepts. The courier can earn more because all those customers just placed orders, and you better bet they're all tipping. And then the customers don't have to pay such crazy fees. We're all placing orders. I mean, you guys are seeing like a regulatory response fee, a service fee that's 15%, a delivery fee on top of that, and then you have to pay tip. You're going to order something for $8 and end up paying 20 just to move the thing. So we're trying to address that by building this network of multi-brand ghost kitchen operators and then connect them with buildings to drive an actual profitable food delivery model.
Wow. So that's a lot to absorb. And if I could just repeat what I heard back to you, you can confirm if I'm thinking about it in the right way. So it sounds like the one-to-one, like restaurant to single customer delivery model is unprofitable. And it's getting squeezed by these food delivery companies. As much as they are funded by VCs, there's still just this overwhelming gap that they need to cross in terms of profitability. So what Zuul helps do is it's a platform that helps aggregate demand and aggregate supply so that you can kind of bundle orders and send them to bundled consumers that might be in buildings. And that mathematics helps restaurants stay somewhat profitable.
Exactly. And it's not possible with the traditional food delivery model. And that's why we're so excited, is because this new style of operator really offers a peek into the future of what's possible, because you can really only facilitate group ordering if you have enough options. I mean, sure, on Fridays, you at the office could say, like, let's all order tacos or whatever. And that's fine, but that's not a consistent program your office can really participate in. And same thing on the restaurant side. If you look at DoorDash's like S1 and how a lot of these platforms talk publicly about their own initiatives to make themselves more profitable, they're always talking about AOV. What's that, average order value? And no amount of going after the suburbs to get family ordering or menu engineering is really going to get you there. So the way we look at it is, yes, there's an average order value. What's the transaction size? But then we get to look at it also as average delivery value, because we get to move all these orders together with a single courier.
That's amazing. And I hope that it influences the future of food delivery so that it's more profitable, because I think everyone right now wants to hear the story of the restaurateur who's surviving and thriving in COVID, and not necessarily the large corporation that's doing so at the expense of the people who are actually putting food on the table.
Absolutely. Right. How can you actually, the restaurant industry is, I think, just ultra fragmented, right? And it's really hard for independent operators to have the time or the bandwidth or even the budget to kind of fund a digital strategy or investment in an Instagram or a digital marketing platform. They're busy, their oven just broke down or whatever. It's like a lot going on. So what we're trying to do is create that path to profitability, right? That doesn't have to come from huge like marketing campaigns or things that are unreasonable to expect. Rather, we're trying to create that network that operators can plug into and gain access to a more efficient food delivery system that we're working on building, and we're incentivized to build because we want to prove out this new model is possible.
Got it. Well, we have just under 15 minutes left. I have 2 more questions for you. One more about the business, one more about the personal. And then we'll leave some time for our audience to ask questions as well. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Perfect. So, of course, the theme for our event today is entrepreneurialism. And I want to ask you, how do ghost kitchens and companies like Zuul increase the rate of entrepreneurialism in food?
We think about that all the time. I think what's happening right now with virtual brands and ghost kitchens is really exciting for the industry, even if in this first iteration, it's not been the most like positive financially for it. It is a truly groundbreaking development in terms of technology finally impacting the restaurant industry the same way it's upended traditional retail. So what's happened is that the idea of a brand and the IP, the intellectual property associated, the logo, the menu, whatever, has been dislocated from a geographic location because it can now exist online. So it's a separation of the brand and the production that is just the like kind of biggest impact we've seen in terms of the restaurant industry, the biggest change we've seen in the restaurant industry for a while. This is like the same thing. Like I would put it on the level of the fast casual boom of like the 2010s, right? Which was often in response to like is post-recession, you know, you wanted quick, fast, cheap food, but there was a new taste wave of like farm to table, blah, blah, blah. Really exciting, huge. This is the next thing. It is the fact that now anyone can cook these brands anywhere. And so the way we think about, you know, ghost kitchens, restaurant technology, and you know what we're doing, and a small part of that is that it's facilitating a whole new wave of creativity, of brand development, of chef collabs with celebrities. I mean, you guys are seeing like even Mario Lopez or Pauly D has Pauly D subs. I don't know if you guys knew that, but Pauly D from the Jersey Shore is officially a restaurateur. Yeah, you
nice.
Check it out. And so, I mean, all of this is now made possible from that idea of the dislocation of the brand and the geography. So we see this as definitely increasing the rate of entrepreneurship among restaurateurs because they now can gain access to IP that they didn't have to create, or they could create it themselves and partner with a friend who maybe works on another restaurant and just launch this. If they draw up a logo and they quickly take some iPhone photos on a cool background, they have a new restaurant. That's what's happened. And so with Zuul, we built our technology to meet this new business model. And there are a lot of like more like less fun things about it, like accounting needs to be different because if you're doing a brand partnership with a national virtual brand, you need to clearly delineate those sales and have certain commissions attached to allow for how the celebrity gets paid out or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. A lot of components to, you know, this new business model that's currently not reflected in the traditional set of restaurant tech resources. So we've made it ultra easy to spin up a new virtual brand with the click of a button. We have all the accounting and things pre-programmed and ready to go. You know, really ultimately, we're building this so that an operator can start their ghost kitchen or their restaurant, run a ghost kitchen out of the back and be like, what do I want to use? What do I want to cook? Which brands do I want to partner with? And it can be an ultra dynamic experience.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the biggest developments in food service as well. And I was reading an interesting article recently from Eater about how there's almost a backlash now. Some of the smaller restaurant operators who, maybe for lack of a better word, are more old-fashioned, who are creating delicious food, but they're having a hard time competing in kind of the virtual culture-driven world of food delivery that we currently have. And I think that's a very valid concern. But I also think that your comment illuminated this. It's not enough to make good food anymore. You have to consider what the branding is going to be. You have to consider how you're going to make marketing and, you know, drive your brand through this cultural web. That's the new reality, I think, of a lot of food operators. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, COVID has just been a real kind of kick in the butt to a lot of operators who had to get online for the first time. And it's unfortunate. I think what's going to happen, we're going to see a clearing out of a lot of those independent operators, unfortunately. And we're going to see, my prediction is, you know, a bifurcation of the industry. Either you are a more experientially driven restaurant that's still more high end. People are going for something to Instagram. It's an in-person experience. That's where the brand plays out. But The other side then is the digitally optimized businesses. So the ones that have a really smart tech stack that can use something like Bicky to acquire customers from Grubhub into their own online ordering channel. It's the fact that they even have their own online ordering channel where they don't have to pay commission. It's them cooking many brands out of a kitchen. It's all these different strategies that are going to allow a brand to be successful in this new digitally driven operating environment that restaurants are dealing with. And unfortunately, the food industry has a lot of old school operators. I worked with a restaurant here that only took cash, and they were considering using our technology because they found it easy to use. But you have to imagine they didn't even have a point of sale. And that's the type of operators that are going to be most challenged by the new dynamics, and where smart tech needs to come in to help them, because otherwise, if they just take the easiest road, unfortunately with Grubhub, DoorDash, etc., those commissions aren't going to allow them to create a really thriving business, and maybe they did in a way they had before when they had walk-in.
Cool. Well, we have 7 minutes left, it looks like. And I want to make sure that I'm addressing 2 of our audience questions. So the first question comes from Will. He's asking if Zuul helps independent operators shift to becoming a multi-brand ghost kitchen.
Yes, actually, we just launched one last week. So really what we're able to do is help a restaurant turn into a ghost kitchen or multi-brand operator, as you called out in the question. So what that looks like is we develop a virtual brand plan with them. We program it into the menu and into the online ordering experience, and then help them launch the technology into their space, as it comes with a small kitchen management screen system so they can execute the orders. So we're certainly a part of that evolution into that type of business model, and can help bridge that gap. Really where we're taking the technology and our vision for the future is that it can be as easy as a restaurant clicking to download the software after they sign up for the monthly SaaS fee. And then they can basically select from a menu which brands, based on the menu items and the ingredients or the labor model, which brands they want to cook, automatically programming it into the kitchen, allowing it to be set up with the back of house software, and then they're ready to go. So that's where we're taking it. We kind of have our first operator of that flavor up and running now. It's been a huge learning experience, but ultimately is what we see a very viable part of our business going forward.
Excellent. I hope that answers Will's question. We have another question from Anya, and this is a question that I love. She asks that so much of food innovation is centered around data and tech. How can we, as students, get up to speed on those trends, and what classes, competencies, and skills are most helpful?
Great question. So I would recommend, if any of you are able to take an intro to CS, computer science course, please do so. Product is a part of any job. Ideally, product is a part of anything you do in the future. You have to understand at a baseline how technology works. So you are so lucky to still be in school. I did not take an intro to CS course. I'm about to sign up for Harvard's free online version, because it is that important to my role that I can speak the language of the engineers and help them understand the concepts I'm trying to build on the product side. I'm not just a COO, I also lead our entire product team and what we're building. So bridging that gap and being able to work with engineers is ultra important, and all of you are going to be much more effective in your roles moving forward if you have a better understanding of how technology works. The other piece is definitely this industry is so full of exciting things happening. There are a lot of great publications and writers and people to follow on Twitter that I recommend for keeping yourself up to date on what the most exciting things are. One is you should definitely sign up for the newsletter Expedite by Kristen Hawley. She is a premier like national food tech reporter and a good friend of mine. She does the most exceptional writing and commentary on what's happening. Again, it's called Expedite, but she also does a lot of writing for Eater and a bunch of other publications. The other one is Food Tech Connect, which was founded by Danielle Gould, another friend in the industry. It's an exceptional newsletter that compiles food tech news across dining and what that experience is to restaurants, to farming, to CPG goods. So definitely check that out. I recommend as well, then Matt Newberg is like my final person. He has a newsletter called Hungry. Some of his content is paywalled, but HNGRY. If you guys want to check out what he's written, it's a great starter pack for the industry and exciting things happening. So those people definitely get you on your way. Very good writers and very good commentary on everything.
Awesome. And funny story about the newsletters. I got the idea to have you on here because I was reading, my smart briefs in the morning, and there was a quote from Kristen Barnett at Zuul, and I was like, wait a second. Texted you, hey, is this you? Yeah, exactly.
So this the same Kristen Barnett?
Yeah. So it's great. And then everyone here, one day soon, your friends will start showing up in your news headlines, and that's a fun moment. All right, we have 2 minutes left, so I want to ask you one more question, and we'll try to keep the answer pretty quick. What advice do you have for anyone that's finding their way through the food industry?
That's such a good question. I guess because it's not one of those industries that necessarily has the most structured career path, you kind of have to be okay with taking anything to get your foot in the door. If you're passionate about it, though, I always believe that you're going to inherently work harder, work to understand the concepts better, and do better work. So I recommend finding cool companies you think are doing amazing things, whether it be something like Oatly that has the coolest marketing campaigns ever, or what brought me to Dig In, which was I want to work at a restaurant that has this, or a company that has the same food values that I hold personally. I didn't think when I joined Dig In, I would end up being the COO of a ghost kitchen company. No way. But I had an understanding that if I really liked what I was doing, I would find my way. So I'd say, look for the companies that are the most exciting, see if they're hiring, but also, again, don't fall into the business school trap or things that I certainly did when I was looking for jobs. I was like, oh, if they don't have a role, I could definitely never work there. Shoot them an email, tweet at them, LinkedIn DM, whatever it is. These companies are going to have things happen where they need to bring talented people on board. I also recommend doing a temp to perm situation where you can say, let me work for you for 3 months. 3 months. I'll do anything. Again, start getting the experience on the resume. The food industry is also really insular. So we often wouldn't hire just straight finance MBAs at Dig because we really had to see, do they understand the space? Do they have a greater why behind what they're doing? Have they worked on a farm? Things like that. It all counts ultimately when you bring it to the table. So you can think about it in a little bit more creative way, which I think is great.
Excellent. Well, Kristen, thank you so much for joining. I always love talking to you, and I'm so glad that I was able to get a chance today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to see you again, but also great to have everyone be able to share this with everyone. And thank you for the awesome questions.
Excellent. Well, we'll speak again soon. Thank you.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye. All right, lots to digest there. But right now, I would like to turn it over to Janet, who's going to introduce our next two speakers.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Steve and Kristen. That was great. So I'm just going to take a second and make sure that our two next speakers are spotlighted here. I'm sorry. Sam, I know you're on. I'm looking for you. There you are. All right. Okay, beautiful. So I am really excited to introduce this next panel with two amazing startups who are upcycling ingredients to make delicious beverages, as Steve was telling you guys about in the beginning. So for those unfamiliar with upcycling, it's the process of taking an ingredient or several that would otherwise be landfilled and creating a consumable product from it. So for Misadventure & Co., that means using baked goods from local food banks that would otherwise go uneaten and turning it into a high quality and sustainable vodka. Their process removes more CO2 from the atmosphere than it takes to create the product. So we'll chat about that a little bit today. And so welcome Sam, the CEO and co-founder of Misadventure. And then welcome also to Matt Osofsky, the COO and co-founder of Take Two Foods. And Take Two uses rejuvenated barley to create a delicious and protein-rich plant-based milk. So Take Two gives a second life to spent grain, which is a byproduct of beer production. So we're really excited to have you both, and I think looking forward to a really rich discussion today. So first, I want to start with this idea of sustainability. So sustainability is built into the bottom line of both of your companies. Why is sustainability important to you? Sam, let's start with you.
No pressure. I think I'm most often quoted saying that finding a way to achieve sustainability and combat climate change is the moral question of our age. We can't escape it. And if I weren't trying to address it, then I would somehow feel absentee from my own life. So in terms of starting a company, my background was, I think you'll probably talk about this later, so I'll be as brief as possible. But my background was trying to add value to food systems in other countries and trying to add value is both an amorphous topic, but one that every once in a while you can find a really tangible end where you've taken something, in this case, that has a 3-day shelf life and turned it into something that has an infinite shelf life. And in our particular case is also euphoric. So you have two things that you get to add to the world. And it was something that I could touch. It was something I could wrap my head around, and I had already tried to start a distillery. So I didn't particularly plan to start a business model that was right at the nexus of a global man-made environmental calamity and craft beverage, but here we are.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, we're going to get into that story in just a minute. So Matt, what about you? Why is sustainability important?
I think now more than ever, people are aware of the interconnectedness of not only the life itself, the environment, in our communities, right? And to look only at one of those or to exploit any one of those creates an imbalance, right? That ultimately does harm. So for us as a company, really, really want to focus on not only just being stewards, right? Is because it's the right thing to do, right? For the welfare of all life, but it's almost an obligation as a business that, there's so much power that the businesses have to implement change and to achieve impact and to inherently, create a business where if the business succeeds, you are improving, the environment, you are improving your community, reducing waste, improving the welfare of animals and et cetera. And so for us, it's almost like, almost what Sam was saying, it would be irresponsible to ignore it and not really take it face on for the impacts that I have in our lives, but also the generations to come.
Absolutely. So let's get into the stories of your startups. You each have really different startup stories, so I'd like to explore those. Matt, let's start with you. You got your start at AB InBev. So can you tell us about that experience and how that helped you get Take Two going?
Yeah, it's each entrepreneur's story is a little different, and mine's unique in that, or Take Two's unique in that, we actually started from a big company and actually spun off as a startup, which is the opposite of what people traditionally think, right? When you start small and get acquired. Earlier in my career, it's a very traditional career, engineer and scientist in pharmaceuticals for a better part of a decade, And then I had that moment where, I was looking forward and I really wanted to understand, like, what do I want to leave as a legacy? How do I want to use my skills to contribute to change? I realized that working at a large, company focused on chemicals and whatnot wasn't it. And so I used my business school, the 2 years I got my MBA. I really focused on, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What are the tools I need to know and understand to operate, successfully in that space. But coming out of business school, I wasn't ready. I didn't quite know where I wanted to go in terms of, where I wanted to focus my skills and create impact. And so AB InBev was interesting. That one is beer, and, it's a beverage that's been bringing people and communities together for thousands of years. But two, it's a truly global industry, right? And so it's one of the largest beverage companies on earth. And looking at that, there was just an opportunity to understand, like, okay, what does food and bev look like at that scale, and what are the opportunities there? And through AB InBev, fortuitously, their leadership was really focusing on sustainability in the next 100 years, understanding their role, in impacting the environment, but also investing in ideas internally. So through an internal accelerator, this concept of this grain byproduct from brewing. For people not familiar, when you take barley and the starch from barley goes into the beer to make alcohol, and what's traditionally left over is considered waste, right? What it is, it's concentrated fiber and protein from barley. And it was identified as maybe an interesting concept of what can be done with this. And so through this accelerator and through this collaboration with AB InBev, we found a way to save the grain, to capture it and repurpose it. And so from take two, one of the things that was interesting is, working in a big company, it's really hard to take something that's small and grow it, right? There's just a lot of bureaucracy at large organizations that can prevent, ideas from coming to life, and they recognize that. And so, with take two, we spun out and began operating independently and really understanding, like, what can we do with the saved grain? What can we do with the rejuvenated barley? How can we make new and compelling plant-based products for consumers that are not only nutritious for you, but also have a positive impact on the environment? So, without AB InBev and without, their look at, sustainability and their willingness to embrace disruption, Take Two wouldn't have the strategic partnership we have today.
Great, thanks, Matt. So yeah, you alluded to being it being a global industry, and Sam, I know that you got your start abroad. So how did you come up with the idea for Misadventure? Sam, you're on mute.
First, I just want to address what Matt had said, that, and I hope we get to come back to it later, having a strategic partner from the beginning. I'm on the outside looking in, hoping to find one. And I know other startups that had started small and then either been acquired or found a strategic investor were able to make that connection. At the same time, one of the intricacies of creating an upcycled product is that there isn't a growing cycle. There's no factory for our feedstock. You have to normalize someone else's waste schedule to your production cycles. And being able to work with a partner as amazing as AB InBev from the beginning would allow for both data and logistical planning that we don't have the ability to do yet. And my mind's just, it sounds great. But how did I get the idea for this? So I believe Steve and I both went to UChicago for undergrad, and I'll go all the way back to my first girlfriend. She said that that's great. When you want to be a writer and a history major, you want to be part of the world, but I want to change it. And I didn't have enough sense of self-worth to go tell her to walk off a short pier at the time. changed my major to design it yourself. And in January 2007, the cover article of the Wilson Quarterly, which is one of the least academically rigorous journals put out there, was about a coming agricultural revolution in Uganda. I tried to reverse engineer it and somehow was exposed to this Pandora's box of questions, ranging from the actual agrarian and agronomy questions of like how things are grown to a political economy and international logistics. And I was hooked. There was nothing I could do to stop asking these questions. And in some ways, this company is just a product of my curiosity and the fact that I'm willing to sacrifice.
I know Sam's connection is a little spotty, so we'll see if he comes back. Sam, we lost you there for a minute.
Frustration. We had this question about. Am I back?
Yes, you're back now.
Am I back? Hello?
Yep. Can you hear us?
I just had this idea that either teaching or making a distillery would be fun. It would make me happy. And graduated in the middle of the last major recession and started trying to think about what it was I could do to bring my curiosity and my happiness to bear. Eventually was in London at the School of Oriental and African Studies and ended up dropping out to try to make a distillery there, but wasn't able to raise enough startup capital to get an entrepreneur's visa. When you run out of money and your visa expires, where do you go? You go home. And my father said probably the most generous thing that anyone has ever said, and I don't think he knew it would take this long or be this hard, but he said, you started something, why don't you finish it? Whereas my mother would have really preferred I go get a job. And so 7 years later, from that point, here we are. My business partner and I met in 2013. And when we get to the section about any kind of takeaways that we might give for other potential entrepreneurs in food and bev, team building is something I definitely want to touch on. It's not one of my strengths. And you're looking at an industry predominated by incredibly mature companies, and you can't do it by yourself. So it was 2015 that the now off-cited Natural Resources Defense Council report came out about 40% of food being wasted. And we were in a transition period from thinking we were going to make whiskey to needing to make a white spirit because it takes only a week. All spirits take a week to ferment about, and then you distill them off and they're clear. It's the aging process in traditionally aged products like whiskey or barrel-aged rum that would take years. And no potential investor wanted to stake first-time entrepreneurs where it was built in that there'd be no revenues for at least 2 years. So we transitioned to a white spirit. That's when I said to my partner, hey, I think we can make this from bread. I think I know where to find it. Joined our local food system council and asked, does anyone have excess baked goods? And 6 hands shot up. And it was the open secret that the charitable giving networks were overrun with low nutrition value, high turnover baked goods, particularly pastries, that they needed to accept in order to get the higher value commodities like dairy, fresh produce, meat, etc., but otherwise couldn't move to enough hungry or food insecure mouths fast enough. We started doing our own R&D first in the garage and then scaled up and eventually raised 1.6 million, and we'll probably start an internet round in the next month. And our goal is still to find that partner out in front of us that allows us to not only have runway, but market within a mature industry.
Yeah, that's a really interesting story. And also how you originally wanted to make whiskey, which takes much longer, but then shifting to vodka not only got you that investment, but also the turnover of baked goods. And you can,
Yeah,
go ahead.
the business model is completely different. If you have to hold a warehouse with no for years, you turn into that you previously wouldn't have as a manufacturer. And so in the same way people joke about McDonald's being a real estate company, it would be trying to orchestrate kind of the same business paradigm, but at a very small level. That last thing, if I ever make a bourbon that's 51% corn tortilla, it'll be the most California thing that's ever happened.
Well, we'll watch out for that. All right, so Sam, let's stick with you just for a minute longer. I think it's pretty incredible that Misadventure is the first carbon negative spirit. I know that you mentioned on our prep call that there are now a couple of others that you've inspired or helped through the process a little bit, but can you explain at a high level what carbon negativity means in the context of your business and how you go about achieving it?
So each of the now 3 companies that are making a carbon negative or philanthropically minded vodka came to it from different areas of expertise. I was working in food systems. One tries to electrolyze CO2 directly into ethanol, and one is upcycling cascara, the fruit around a coffee bean, into a fermentable good and then distilling it. The basics of all of our life paths into beverage were become very curious about one thing, find a value add that has a higher marginal value than you were able to orchestrate in your previous industry, and transition there and hope that you're able to grow the initiative such that it ever gets to the scale that you would like to make an impact in this world. So for us, carbon negativity is a general life cycle analysis of our entire operation and finding out how much carbon we produce as a manufacturing operation, and then plotting what non-zero number based off of our R&D and our industrial process is required for us to process per month in order to be able to offset it. The reason this offset's even possible is because if any of this waste stream were to go to landfill and decompose into methane and not be captured, then the amount of CO2 equivalent that it would produce would be 25 to 40 times more potent than the actual CO2 that we produce by burning even a methane boiler, et cetera. And that multiples the entire reason this is possible. If we stop methane from happening but create CO2, it's more benign. And we're able to produce enough product where we are sequestering more carbon equivalent than we are producing.
That's really cool. Thank you, Sam. Matt, so similar question. I'm curious from the perspective of, the technical aspects of your production, what does it actually mean to rejuvenate barley, first of all, and what are the environmental impacts? Can you kind of walk us through your process?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the heart of, rejuvenating barley is upcycling, right? As we said before, it's the spent grain, the spent barley grain, it's a byproduct of beer brewing. And traditionally it's gone to waste, and so, by capturing it and utilizing it, to create new ingredients and new food products, what we're able to do is transform what was considered waste and move it up the food hierarchy, right? So at the beginning of the step is first you have to divert it, right? What was essentially trash already has, a supply chain for people who are using it or disposing of it, and you have to capture that material in our case in a really high quality food safe way, and then actually put it into another whole series of transformation processes so you can actually get a barley protein and a barley fiber, and those are what we use to craft our currently our barley milk and also our other food products. And so one of the main benefits you get from using a byproduct is you don't have a huge impact on agricultural use or biodiversity loss associated with agriculture, right? Barley is already being grown for beer, right? And by taking the waste stream, you're capturing that waste and capturing that nutrition so that we can put it back into the food chain. And so, the impact of that is, more efficient use of land, right? Because, there's no secondary waste streams, that are being generated. And then also with water, right? I mean, we all know that, not all plants or plant milks are created equal. The gallons and gallons of waters it takes to grow an almond, right? With barley, we don't have that. On its own, it's a super efficient, grain. We've been cultivating it for thousands of years. And it's actually, when you look at it, the protein in the barley is super unique and differentiated. It has a really mellow taste and flavor. The barley fiber is also great. It's a prebiotic fiber. And so when we look at that, there's not only, food chain impacts with, diverting losses, but also environmental impacts. And so this year, we're already on track to upcycle and repurpose about 500,000 pounds of the spent grain, and that's just scratching the surface. Looking forward, at the 10 plus billion pounds of barley grains being produced from beer every year, we can probably have a line of sight to upcycle and repurpose about 75 or 80% of that, which is huge.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Super cool. So both of your products are the first, and in Take Two's case, I think still the only beverage in your category to be using upcycled ingredients. So I'm curious, are there any unique growth challenges that you've encountered within that niche? Matt, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. I think for us with, barley milk, and especially based on an upcycled ingredient, there's a consumer education component that I think a lot of other categories, you don't have to deal with. If you created a new almond milk, people already know what that is. They consume it. They know what an almond is. They know what almond tastes like. And for us, we had to challenge two things. Like, what is barley? What does it taste like? Consumers in the U.S. especially are not aware of it. It's not like really a staple ingredient. People are, does it taste like beer, or what's going on here? And then the second component is upcycling. Right. In 2021, upcycling and food-related upcycling is much more common discussion than it was 3 or 4 years ago. 4 years ago, if you talk about upcycled food, like, people are like, what's that? Like, am I eating garbage? Like, what's going on here? And so the consumer education piece has been critical for us, establishing a new category and really basing it on, what is considered, a new ingredient for most people. And then layering in upcycle on top of that, becomes a very nuanced, marketing communication problem, right? How do you engage people and bring them on the journey, and get their attention long enough to really, understand like why this is so important.
Got it. Thanks, Matt. And then there's a question in the chat that I want to throw in now while we just were talking about, the process of getting barley and rejuvenating it. How selective can you be on the origins of your barley? And could you ever promise a line of organic, or like, what's that supply chain look like?
Yeah, so this is one of the benefits of working with, such a mature company and a strategic partner like AB InBev, right? They have a great control of their supply chain. They actually work with the barley farmers, and they have a huge agricultural program for barley. And so there are actually organic barley grains out there being used for beer. And so, getting those grains and actually capturing those and diverting, the organic grains, it is possible, and it is on the horizon. And so for us, currently most barley is conventional, it's not organic, but, as the industry shifts to organic and, having a partner with, really great quality systems like AB InBev, we can get organic barley ingredients. And then ultimately for me, an organic barley milk or other, Take Two products.
All right, Sam. So similar question to you. What unique growth challenges have you encountered within this upcycled vodka spirits niche?
Some of the same. As time has gone on, fewer and fewer people question anything. And I think we had talked in our prep call about two, at least what I found fascinating transitions. The first was talking about it versus actually having a product. More people were skeptical before it existed than after they were able to try it. The second was the power of labeling. Once it was in a product in a package with professional and government approved labeling, people asked so many fewer questions. All right, fine. From the gluten-free to the upcycled like education curves, the second it was written on a label, even though I wrote the label, no one asked. So in that particular case, packaging as a obvious vehicle for communication is key. For a small company, there's no other place or media market, if you want to call it that travels with the product through the distribution channel all the way to the consumer. In our industry, people don't really engage with liquor brands on their websites, for example, particularly the legacy ones. So how do you build a tech stack or a communication strategy where you can actually share your upcycled information? This plethora of new data about what it is you're consuming with a consumer when they don't traditionally ever spend time on Grey Goose's website or Johnny Walker's website. There's not new information there. And most of their online presences, other than Tito's, which is just filled with dogs, doesn't really share much brand information at a national level. And most of the events for small brands aren't as lavish as the big celebrations that Diageo or Tito's can hold. So our Instagram, while professionally done and beautiful, you still kind of have like this dearth of communication strategies. And if any of you figure out how to be able to share a tremendous amount of education with a consumer while keeping them engaged for upcycled products, we both want to know. And then past that, our particular category is plagued by the large companies' use of vodka for the last 50 years. Most brands are owned by a small brands and price points up and down. They have a very stagnant marketing campaign around how they present the product. And most people think that because these big companies that could make delicious product often offer subpar or more acetone rich stuff that tastes like college or tastes like a hospital, that's what vodka is and has to be. And so there's some number of people who, if you're trying to target traditional alcohol consumers as opposed to sustainability evangelists, then they won't touch vodka at all. If you're trying to talk to sustainability evangelists, I have yet to find a digital metric that I can correlate well enough with the real world to be able to find out where to take to traditional distribution, where I don't have to have points of distribution ubiquitously, but I've hyper focused or found a scalpel to my people. You can find them online really easy. It's much harder to try to find a place where they are, particularly in concentrations big enough to make a strategic investment. And then after that, direct to consumer is hard, not impossible after the pandemic, but hard. This is a highly regulated product and it's heavy. So shipping is not cheap. And most people aren't interested in paying for shipping. They psychologically feel that it's a waste. So Amazon has done an amazing job deferring or misplacing that psychological grievance with Prime and things, but we don't have that luxury, and Whole Foods and Amazon don't distribute alcohol ubiquitously around the United States. It's only in certain markets. So there's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it's actually interesting you talk about the struggle around marketing and education. I actually encourage everybody on the call to go check out both Misadventure and Take-Two's websites. I think they have really great marketing, and I love the emphasis on the hedonistic sustainability, saving the world is worth a shot. We want to bring joy to people drinking our products. So anyway, we'll talk to some marketing MBAs and get back to you on that question. But Sam, what you were just talking about the pandemic struggles is a perfect segue into my next question. So, obviously COVID-19 changed the course of almost every business last year. And so Matt, you actually launched Take Two the month before the nationwide shutdown happened, or right around then. So could you tell us what that was like and how you've adapted since then?
Yeah, they say timing's everything. And the pandemic was obviously unexpected and, not in our plan. And so we had geared up, our 1-year plan, how we're going to activate a new product, field marketing campaigns, like everything was in place. And essentially, literally 1 week after we got into the shelves in our first account, everything started closing, right? And so, it was a challenge for the team, right? Because basically, you had some amazing people aligned, behind a plan, and you hit stop. And, at first there was some reflection of, okay, what are we going to do? What's the impact of the business? But very quickly, we anchored into, our mission and purpose. And we started saying, it's not about sales revenue growth. It's about how can we really be there for our community when they're in need. And so, initially we went from, trying to sell milk to figuring out, like, how can we help people donating milk to food banks and providing it to, the frontline workers, et cetera. And then once things began to stabilize, then we had a second challenge, which is, how do you get people to buy a new food product and a new category product without sampling it or trying it, right? That's, when you go to Costco or you go to the store and taste it, like, that's one of the main things you do when you launch a new product. And we still can, almost a year later. And so we had to revisit, like, how are we communicating and engaging consumers? And luckily for us, sustainability is a very powerful message. People are genuinely interested in understanding, what sustainability is. And with food products, with upcycled products, we have a lot of really meaningful conversations with our consumers. And so from there, we sort of went from, a sales focused growth plan to more of just, engaging with the community, consumers. We launched, a direct to consumer on our website. We had not planned on doing that. And that really bought us enough runway and allowed us to use our resources on hand to really get us through the worst of it, right? That first 6 months was extremely challenging for everyone. And so, I think that just goes to, for all the, aspiring entrepreneurs out there, it's going to take longer than you think. It's going to be harder than you think. Whether it's a pandemic or something else, it's a very unpredictable world in terms of where the challenges or opportunities come from. And it's just, I think it's inherent, if it was going to be easy, like, everyone would be an entrepreneur, right? And so for us, we just, roll with the punches and, accept it for what it is and build on it.
It's great that you guys were able to make it work, and that's really impressive. Sam, I know that you were around for a bit longer before the pandemic happened. So what was your experience like, and how has your business changed, if at all?
Well, our cellar door sales, our term of art for people actually coming and visiting our physical location, are down over 90%. Our tasting room is completely closed, and those are just like the smallest impacts. After that, 90% of our customers shut down. We were mostly selling into hospitality, and they were gone. And we kind of we were lucky enough to get a grant from the state of California in order to be able to improve our waste diversion. And we had one last payment coming to us just after March. Or it could have been our last. And we just had to look around and say, are we winding down? Do we take this 50 grand and make the prudent decision? Or do we make hand sanitizer? And within a week, we launched direct to consumer. And we're one of the first distilleries around the country to offer it nationally direct to consumer when it wasn't available. And that was singularly the best, from a revenue perspective, not even a moral one, the best choice that we had ever made. It's part of the reason we're still here. The pandemic also did a good thing for us in as much as that grant was funded by reimbursement. And in the first time in the history of Cal Recycle, we were able to orchestrate a scenario in which they advanced us the money instead. The money that was so hard for us to be able to free up was for the linchpin piece of machinery that separates our bread and baked goods from packaging. And once we're able to install it, because it just arrived last month, we'll go from depackaging 100 pounds of bread an hour to 3,000 to 5,000 pounds of, no, I'm sorry, 6,000 to 10,000 pounds of bread an hour. So we're finally on the verge of being able to orchestrate some of our full business model. If only our runway had stayed intact. Sanitizer sales went to zero ostensibly July 1st. And we've been holding on since then. It's been an education by fire for sure. It's very hard to make strategic inflection points when nothing's really working. And when you look around at your team and say, we are doing zero things that are currently profitable, do we have any money to fix it? And the answer is no. We've had that conversation a dozen times at this point, and we're still here. Our investors will ask, like, how much runway do you have left? Only 6 weeks. That's more than we've had in 8 months. What are you talking about? That's wonderful. So the pandemic has definitely given and taken away, but I think the biggest ray of hope is that for 10 years, industry insiders were trying to say that online ordering of alcohol was going to happen. And with the pandemic, Nielsen was able to report that it actually finally did. Certain regulatory reliefs allowed last mile delivery services to be able to deliver this outside of specialized ones. You're now able to, through our website, to deliver to 41 states. It's still, the shipping's still expensive, but if you find the right partner with the right UPS account, it can be manageable. Right now, we just have this new challenge that the players who benefited the most from this behavior change were legacy players. And so you still have a communications burden, but finally it's online and finally it's national. So I'm not talking to 50 people, I'm talking to 50 million potentially. And those numbers finally make it more realistic that we'll find the number of consumers necessary to be able to get to the next stage. So hence the various financing strategies that we're about to go through that I think will be successful and allow us to get through our seed round and into our Series A.
Thank you for sharing that. So we have about 10 minutes left. I have one more question, and then I want to encourage folks on the call to put your questions in the chat. So for both of you, what advice do you have for students who are seeking to build careers in the nexus between food and sustainability? And I'll let either one of you choose who goes first.
May I, Matt? So I referenced before team building. Like I said, this is industry predominated by mature players. They're, particularly if you're starting from the outside looking in, but anytime, most businesses, their problems are all similar. They're all people problems. Particularly when things go wrong, reliability, expertise, disposition, they all matter. And there's no real, I never got an MBA, so I don't know if there's a class that really walks you through in a sage-like way how to be able to build your team around you. True believers in what you are trying to achieve are essential. Every once in a while, you'll have a temp or something who comes in who is just not a culture fit, and that matters. Even for a blip, it matters. But outside of that, you are about to embark on I think Steve brought it up in the last panel or last discussion, an endeavor that has very little to do with just your operations and your product, but a lot to do with technology, communication, and path to market strategy that all requires communicators, people skilled enough to be able to implement them, people skilled enough to be able to share them. And at times it's just been my partner and I looking at each other like, okay, what do we have to learn today? And if you get to a certain scale and you're lucky enough to get to a certain scale in which you're still learning on the job, it gets harder and harder because you're taking away time from orchestrating your vision in other verticals. I'd also just say be as disciplined as possible. Sanitizer saved us, but starting new verticals on the fly really fast. I think we did it with $2,000. We had $2,000 cash left. That was it. And one of our board members handed it to us out of a backpack. And it worked, but I don't wish it on anyone. Being slow, methodical, and starting with communication and QC first are kind of the places that I'd recommend the most.
Matt, take it away.
Sure. I think from my angle, when you look at food and sustainability, I think right now it's probably the most exciting time to be looking at the convergence of those two topics, right? They've traditionally been separate, say maybe for, organic, that was something from like 20, 30 years ago. And so, right now there's a lot of disruption, right? There's a lot of disruption and the market in your channel strategies, traditional retailers, brick and mortar, that demand shifting online. And so a lot of the incumbents, a lot of people who are entrenched and have invested in keeping you out of those systems, they're on the same playing field as you now, right? I mean, I think the opportunity to get something new to market, there are more sort of, say, cracks to slip in. I wouldn't say the door is open, but I think you have now opportunities where through the channels changing, through, the fact that, you can start having these sales meetings by Zoom, whereas, a year ago you needed a sales team to go in person for these meetings. Makes it a little easier for, startups to get started. And then with food and food technology, the toolkit that people have to draw on to repurpose food, to upcycle food waste, it's probably the best it's ever been and getting better, right? I mean, you can take a look at, we're upcycling barley, but, Impossible's creating, plant-based meats that bleeds and beyond, and, with their healthier version. And so, for my perspective, what I would say is it's a very exciting time. There's huge opportunities that already exist. There's going to be many more that are coming. And so, it won't be easy from a starter perspective, as Sam alluded to. Like, being an entrepreneur is challenging at its core, right? You might be alone on your mission for a long time before people get what you're trying to do. And, I don't think that's necessarily going to change, but, that interface between food and sustainability, I think there's opportunities now that, definitely did not exist 10 years ago. So if you're passionate about it, if it's something that you're willing to dedicate, your waking hours to, one of the things that with entrepreneurs is, the line between what is the personal life and what is your professional life is completely blurred. It's great, right? Your co-founder is your family, right? Your team is, you'll spend more time with them than anyone else. And so, make sure whatever you dedicate that focus to is something you truly believe in, because, you're going to be the one that has to fight that fight and make sure that, you're getting that product to your consumers and making, solving their problems and, for us, spreading joy and health and, all the benefits that have, with repurposing, byproducts and, upcycling waste. And so, yeah, I think I couldn't imagine a better career. So to get started in. So yeah, it's exciting.
You just reminded me of one extra thing, if I haven't just forgotten about it for no reason. Keep to your conviction. there will be any number of people who will try to ask you to be slightly less sustainable in order to be able to get this product to market more profitably. And while it's your, as an entrepreneur and potentially innovator or inventor, your responsibility to find a financial way to tell them no. In this moment, when you're trying to talk to consumers directly, if it turns out that you're a liar or your company's a liar, your initiative to try to make a better world will be for naught. And so that's just one extra thing. Entrepreneurship and sustainability. Normally business is compromised. There's no room for pride. But in this particular case, this is too new. No environmental initiative in CPG, I think, has ever truly transitioned and been the driving reason for product success from the 80s till now. I think Matt and I are right in the right time to potentially, with products that for the very first time aren't just greener, they're the actual thing that's green, to try to challenge that assumption can and should be false. But if you leave your customers behind and tell them a lie, then you're toast.
Yeah, thank you, Matt and Sam. That is a really good way to wrap up this panel, actually. I think it actually goes back also to what Kristen was saying in the last panel about finding a company that aligns with your values, something you're really passionate about, and sticking to your convictions. And I think there's a lot of people that I know on this call personally, and I'm sure others too, that really care about sustainability. And so making sure that that is the core of the business and not something you compromise is a really important message. So thank you for that. So I didn't see any other new questions in the chat, but there was one question from earlier that Matt, maybe you can answer. And before I ask that, I just want to let everybody know that we are in a very small way hoping to contribute a little bit to your businesses by buying a couple of your products, and we'll raffle off a 4-pack sampler of Take 2 milks and a bottle of Misadventure to one person in this audience. So I'm gonna queue up a random name generator for that. And so while I'm doing that, Matt, Sam wanted to know, what does Take 2 do with the spent grade after Take 2 is through with it?
Yeah, so Sam, I think your question might be related to, are there byproducts from actually the upcycling process? And so, as a byproduct, essentially all the spent grain is fiber and protein. And once we sort of separate those into new food ingredients, then there's really no additional byproduct or waste stream, right? What we'll have is, protein that can be used for things like plant-based milk, and then you have fibers, which can be used for either, dietary fiber, fortification, or even baked goods. And so that's the benefit of taking a byproduct and taking one step further. You're just eliminating the waste stream altogether. So it's a very clean way to do it.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, so our first winner is going to win the 4-pack sampler is Eric Gann. So congrats, Eric. We will be in touch with you afterwards to coordinate shipping. And then the winner of the Misadventure bottle of vodka is Lillian Kwong. Let's see if Lillian is still online. Looks like she's not. So we'll make another name. Give me just a second here. All right. Kayansola Ibana. I hope I said your name right. So awesome. We'll be in touch with you guys afterwards. And thank you so much, Matt and Sam. This was a really great panel. And we are going to take a quick 9-minute break before we get to our final panel for the day. So stick around on Zoom. You can just go on mute. Oh, there was one more question. I'm sorry about that. Oh, you know what? Okay. If our panelists can stay on for another minute, could we get this question in? Is that okay? Looks like it's for Sam. Would a similar method to misadventures be applicable to other spirits, specifically tequila or mezcal?
I think I'll start at the beginning. All distilled spirits were historically a way to upcycle. This isn't new in as much as the model was already there. We're just the first to take it from the agricultural sector and apply it to the industrial food system and one specific already produced commodity. But generally speaking, the history of every traditional distilled spirits category was you had a particular cash crop in a particular geographic region. For the Kentucky and Louisiana basin, it was corn because Jefferson had allotted free land if you plant 40 acres of it with corn. If you can't get it to market in time before it spoils, this was the way for you to be able to keep the value. So you end up getting brandy and cognac from wine growing regions. You get bourbon from what was a corn growing region or still is. Agave and mezcal are one of the, as far as I understand, they fall into a category more similar with rum. Rum can be made from the byproducts of sugar refining in the first place, but harvesting blue agave specifically for distillation, I think that happened particularly as a sugar source for distillation. I don't think of it as a food crop that was being preserved. As far as whether other spirits could be made from upcycled goods, Ciroc is already made from low par grapes from the wine growing regions. I believe it's owned by either the Gallo family or something like it. I talked to you about an upcycled whiskey potentially. Vodka's easiest because it's a category that's defined by being odorless and tasteless and can come from any feedstock. Whereas the traditional categories like rum, whiskey, and brandy must come from those specific things, sugar, grain, or grape. So what we call neutral spirits can be turned into vodka by adding nothing to it, or you could perfume it with herbs or fruits and turn it into what we would call a gin. And that, if you have a single starch source of any kind, can happen. People are making vodka from upcycled whey, or not whey, from the lactose in milk. I brought up one from Cascara. You can find more, but it's the fact that we take it all the way up to pure alcohol that what finalizes that transition from what it used to be to what it is now.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sam. All right, and you both are welcome to stick around for our final panel with Breadless in just a couple minutes. So since we went a few minutes over, let's take a 5-minute break. Everyone can grab a snack, grab more coffee, just shut off your videos, but stick around on Zoom and we'll get started right at 2 o'clock or 2 o'clock Eastern. Thanks, everyone.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Mark, LC, I see you guys in the participant list. Are you guys there?
Hello, yes.
Hello, we are here.
Awesome, great to see you both. How are you guys doing today?
Excellent.
Great, happy to be here amongst Rossers. So excited.
Yeah, us too. Welcome back virtually. You get the same Ross experience that we get this year, which is all virtual.
Absolutely, getting used to it, just like you all.
Yeah, so for our audience, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speakers today. Mark Howland and Elsie Staton are a husband and wife duo who are bringing nutritious breadless sandwiches to neighborhoods everywhere and creating a home for those who have always gone off menu. Their new brand is called Breadless, and it is coming to Michigan soon. Mark is a graduate. Yeah, exactly. Mark is a graduate of Harvard Business School who's passionate about fitness and health. And LC is a graduate of our very own Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, who also works full-time at Microsoft in product marketing. Breadless's first to-go and delivery food-focused restaurant is opening right here in Michigan this spring. So Mark, LC, welcome.
Super excited to be here. I also feel like I'm a hybrid Ross alum from Partner Life, being there so often.
Exactly.
Absolutely, Mark was a total classmate, graduated with the class of 2020 with myself.
Well, that's what I love about Ross, is that the partner life is so strong here. I've met tons of people that way, and it's just all good hanging out as one unit.
For sure. But thank you so much, Stephen and team, for having us here today. We're so excited to talk to you.
Oh, it is our pleasure. So let's get right into it. This is a question for both of you. What's your favorite sandwich? Go ahead, Elsie. Go ahead.
My absolute favorite, first of all, I love them all, but my favorite is the chicken on chard. It is also a fan favorite. It's just so delicious. It's on my favorite leaf, which is the Swiss chard. Has its own unique flavor profile, and it pairs very well with the chicken and the pepper jack cheese. So that is my favorite. I'm obsessed with it, but all of them are good.
Ooh, let me challenge you for 1 second, because we'll get to Breadless in just a second. What is your favorite sandwich overall ever? If you could have one sandwich, what would it be?
It is that one. I was not a sandwich person before.
Oh man.
We came up with Breadless, and I just am not a fan of like a lot of bread. I like a Philly cheesesteak. I'll say that, but that's not really a sandwich.
You heard it here, folks. Breadless chicken sandwich on chard is changing the sandwich game as we know it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Mark, how about you? What's your favorite sandwich?
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about everything that I like to eat, and I was the guy taking the bread off of everything. So my favorite sandwich before Breadless wasn't actually a sandwich. It was just the ingredients on the inside of what I was eating. But so I also like the chicken on char. But even though I'm not technically a vegetarian, even though I was raised a vegetarian, our all veggie option is also really good, and I love to eat that one too. So that one is with collard green as a base, with grilled eggplant, sauteed pepper, tomato, onion, and a sun-dried tomato pesto that brings everything together. And that's also been a favorite amongst people who even like meat but are fans. So
I knew this would happen. It's 2:00 and I haven't had lunch yet, and now I'm just hungry. That sounds delicious.
Oh no, we should have sent you some sandwiches.
Yeah, well, I'll have the chance to order some soon, so I'm excited. On the flip side, what is the worst sandwich you've ever had?
Oh my God. Okay, I don't know if it's from a specific place, but anything where the bread just grossly outweighs the rest of the sandwich. I hate when it's like thick bread on top, and then where's the meat? Where's the cheese? Where's everything else? I'm just eating a glob of bread. So those sorts of sandwiches, which I don't know where they're from. I usually don't order sandwiches, but I hate those, and that's what really made me not want to eat sandwiches.
Okay, you're not going to badmouth other sandwich chains. I respect that.
I just don't know.
How about you, Mark? I'm sure many come to mind.
Oh man, I mean, for me, I'm thinking like, where do I start? I mean, essentially, I actually kept a journal or a log, or I have a whole folder of every place that I would go and say, can I get a lettuce bun or a lettuce wrap instead of bread? And the options that have come back have just been ridiculous. So much so that I logged them. That was even in my investor deck, was the photos of all the sandwiches that, well, quote unquote sandwiches that I was ordering places that would come back sloppy, disintegrating, falling apart. And in some instances, wasn't even a sandwich. It would just be a bed of lettuce all crumbled together with a piece of protein on top of it. So if you want to even call that a sandwich, that was definitely the worst.
So that leads right into my next question. What inspired you to create Breadless?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit of, I've been the guy for the past 10 years ordering off the menu, but it really goes back to the beginnings of where I grew up. I mean, I grew up in a lower middle class household in Cleveland, Ohio. My mother was a single mother raising my sister and I by herself. She was a public defender for 40 years, literally committed her entire life to improving the quality of life of others. And so she didn't have a lot of time to cook. And so we would eat out frequently. And where I grew up, the only options when you ate out were burgers, fries, or something fried, right? Or with a lot of bread. And that's not conducive to healthy living. And so I mean, I remember one point when I was little, someone even said I had a gut, and that made a massive impact on my sense of self. And unfortunately, growing up in Cleveland, as many of you may know, I mean, big sports city. And so I pushed myself into becoming a really great athlete. And so I played football, I ran track, and I was able to play those sports throughout college as well. But then when I hit the world of Wall Street, everything turned on its head, because you're working 60 to 100 plus hours a week and working out 20 to 30 minutes a day, if that. And so the dynamic shifts. And so I adopted a low carb lifestyle, maintain that level of fitness. And what I very quickly realized is that there just are not very many options out there. And so thus I was the guy for 10 years at every single business meeting, removing the bread and going to every restaurant saying, can I get a lettuce bun or lettuce wrap instead of bread? And the options were always just ridiculous. And so in 2019, after I had taken my last photo of this option and texted it to LC, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. A place should exist that serves delicious sandwiches without bread, and that should be the core thing on the menu as opposed to the ancillary thing on the menu. And I texted it to LC, and she just started sending me fire emojis. And it was saying, I think that this is bigger than just you. You should further explore this. And who better than us, right? So at that point, we were inspired to create Breadless.
That's amazing. And that's where I feel like we have so much in common, is because I was the guy taking the bread off my sandwiches when I was a consultant. And you're so right. If you're in that working 60 plus hours a week mode, it becomes so hard to balance the fitness aspect into that lifestyle. And when you do, culturally, people don't accept you picking the bread off sandwiches. You get reputation, and jokes are made in the office. So for somebody that has been through that type of
I'm with you, Stephen. I'm with you.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly. Solidarity. Perfect. So you're opening your first brick and mortar store in April, correct?
End of April, early May, springtime. I just like to say spring. That's the one thing about the construction and opening a brick and mortar. There's some things that are outside of your control, but we're moving as fast as we can.
Got it. So this spring. Walk us through your progress to now.
Yeah, so, well, I guess funny enough, I could probably just pick up where I left off, where we said we were going to launch Breadless. I mean, so from there, I was living in Nashville, Tennessee at the time, and I had just transitioned my role with my previous company. And LC was like, well, I'm in Michigan, and I want to be a part of this as well, and we can build this. And so I said, why not? Moved up basically to Ann Arbor, splitting time between Ann Arbor and Cleveland. And it was, the thought process was, how can we just further create like a real product besides everything else that I'd seen? So I was just making these sandwiches for lunch every single day. Then LC and I were brainstorming on different types of recipes that we might use, because I really quickly realized that I was not good at actually coming up with these recipes. So LC came in and gave us some great options. But then we ultimately realized we wanted to bring a real like chef or chief product officer into the mix. And it just so happened, thinking of our list, LC suggested we reach out to our good friend Ryan Salter, who had Open Angel Harlem in New York and had a really successful catering business in Detroit for weddings and for celebrities. And so we gave Ryan a call, and he very quickly hopped on board because he basically was like, I know if you and LC are behind this, you're both going to run 100 miles an hour, and I want to be a part of it. And he knew that the health food movement was something that was only accelerating. So he joined as chief product officer and helped us even refine the concept from just thinking about lettuce to leafy super greens like red Swiss chard, turnip greens, collard greens, packed nutritional values, and chef-crafted combinations. And then the thought process was, well, how do we just get this in the market as efficiently as possible? I've never built a website before myself, but I went on GoDaddy, built a website, started taking photos with my hand on the website that's still on the website today, and just started calling local gyms saying, hey, we have delicious sandwiches without bread, like LA Fitness, Crunch Fitness, the YMCA. The general managers were all like, we hate bread. This sounds great. Come on in. Next thing you know, had a friend from Brown make the logo for $100, standing in a gym with selling sandwiches for $8. And that was all like over the summer. We did pop-ups at House of Pure Vin and Techtown Detroit, etc. This is like in the summertime. LC is working at Microsoft. Then we come back in the fall, and actually I'll let LC talk about some of the things that happened in the fall.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, that was my MBA summer internship when I was at Microsoft in Seattle. But I actually did fly back out to Michigan for some of the pop-ups that we had. So House of Pure Vin is this downtown wine store that's pretty popular in Detroit that my aunt is a part of. So we had our first like tasting ever there. And as Mark mentioned, we started to partner with all of these different gyms, and he would be there, or I would be there, or Ryan, doing pop-ups with the sandwiches. But once I got back to campus, things started to really just get crazy because we started to cater events for actual student groups, which was really exciting because, I had friends like, wait a minute, you have your job offer for Microsoft. What's this breadless thing? What's going on? And then they would have a sandwich and they're like, oh, we need to have this for this group. I'm sending this to faculty. I started to go into the ZLI Center, became an entrepreneurial fellow, started to see what resources we could leverage there. So there was so much going on in the fall to the spring of my final year at Ross involving breadless. We catered for a symposium for the Women Who Launched Symposium. We catered for so many different events. We ended up having pop-ups in Ann Arbor where people could just come to the yard or one of the central locations and pick up sandwiches. We even had a lunch subscription program in the month of February where you could get a breadless sandwich every day. You could choose it, and people would just pick it up from me in Blau and prepay for it. So there were so many different things going on where we had opportunities to beta test, where we had opportunities to gain access to resources, whether that's money or networking within the Zuul Institute. It just was a myriad of opportunities to really get the word out about breadless. And we were so happy because so many of my classmates, the faculty and everyone really loved it. So that really created, it propelled us to kind of where we are now.
So it didn't start, go ahead, Mark, go ahead.
No, I just remembered like one critical thing I missed as a part of that story that summer when we were doing like pop-ups and things like that. I even got a job at Jimmy John's as a sandwich maker for $10 an hour.
Very important to include.
So I could learn the whole QSR model, right, and understand like how it worked, because I never worked in the industry specifically before, and I'm like, who am I to act like I'm going to do something in the QSR space without understanding what it means to be at the ground floor of that. So that was a really important part of our process and thinking through being effective. But yeah, and then I echo everything else he said there as well.
Yeah. And just another thing to add is that Ryan, Mark, and myself were the people creating the sandwiches for every event. We catered everything by ourselves. We did not have staff. We were waking up, sometimes I was waking up at 5 a.m., make the sandwiches, then go to Soul Cycle, then go to class, and then do it all again. So it was us. So it really like made us feel like we know this product, we know how to wrap it. We do this all the time. So we became really attached to it. And that's another aspect, and probably learned from Mark's experience at Jimmy John's making sandwiches, how to best present. So there were all these little learnings sprinkled throughout the process.
Yeah, super grateful to Ross and University of Michigan for being our beta test platform, and they were instrumental through all this, and all the students that were incredibly helpful and supportive. And then I guess, Elsie, I think you took it to the point where you said in February. So COVID, right, hit in February, and then we were already at the point where we were beta testing, essentially, like just selling product, getting feedback, getting reactions, and generating revenue, if you will. And the model worked because, especially catering, was great because we get paid ahead of time, then we could go buy everything. So from a working capital perspective, that was helpful. We didn't need to raise any money for any of that. But that was all, if in the grand scheme of things, small dollars that just helped us to innovate and improve what we were trying to do. But we knew eventually we were going to need a legitimate infrastructure, et cetera. And when COVID hit, that almost was like a perfect time, selfishly, to be able to shift our thought process from doing pop-ups and catering, et cetera, to how do we create a business that can actually scale. And so we really refined like the business plan, the business model, and thought about how much money we're going to need to raise and what the locations will look like, explored everything from food carts to food trucks to ghost kitchens and everything, and ultimately determined that we thought having our own retail location with a small footprint was the way to go in Detroit to start, but we will be coming to Ann Arbor. And so ended up gratefully, through a long slog, people were like, what are you doing raising money for a restaurant concept in the middle of COVID? Like, what are you thinking? And through the grace of God and just a lot of people that come around us and being on calls day after day after day after day and dealing with a lot of rejection, ended up first getting support from people around us, some close friends, to build the base of a small round that was intended to be like $350,000, but then ended up connecting with the gentleman named Cal Vapuri, who got connected through our attorney, and who had seed funded Sweet Green, Warby Parker, Allbirds, and connected with him. And actually, he did a lot of due diligence on us. At one point, he asked us to overnight him sandwiches to New York City, and we had never even
thought about it. Which we had never done before at all.
And we had a friend who's at UPS and called her up like, Win, what do we do? And she contacts another friend who contacts another company, and we figure out who this company is. And I'm on the phone with this company and telling them to overnight us packaging. And then somehow me and LC are up in the morning, and I'm like running to the store to buy bubble wrap, and LC's like making sandwiches.
Cooking eggplant.
And somehow get it all together, slap some stickers on it, throw some marketing in there, and ship it off in the mail.
And cross our fingers.
Cross my fingers. And if the package is arriving at Saturday at 9 a.m., of course I'm like checking the status update every 3 seconds. And we knew it was there. We didn't get a response for like 4 hours. Eventually at 1 o'clock, and after we didn't get a response after noon, I'm thinking it's a wrap, like it must have been greens everywhere. It was terrible.
Like, it's fine. It's not lunchtime yet at 9 a.m. It's fine.
Exactly. At 1 o'clock, we get an email from him, all great. And he had laid out photos of the sandwiches, which we had never even known what this would look like. I mean, he consumed the sandwiches over 30 hours after we shipped them in a box. And so after he laid them all out and we saw it all, and then, next thing you know, he tells us we should increase the size of the round from 350K to 1.1 million, and he was going to lead the round. And so that everything kind of like transformed in that moment. And then, because obviously we're a Michigan-based and Detroit and Ann Arbor-based company, we thought it was super important to have Detroit venture partners as a part of this. So just try to get in contact with who knew this person, who this person, this person. Next thing you know, we're talking to Detroit venture partners, and they decide to come into the round as well, because we thought it was super important, because we're trying to build up the Detroit community, and that's why we're launching in the Midwest versus anywhere else. So that we can really make this a national story, but that started right here, at Michigan and in Detroit.
Which is exciting, because I am born and raised, I'm from downtown Detroit, and I didn't come back to Michigan until I came to Ross. I was on the East Coast in Boston and New York. So to be starting something here in my hometown is just super exciting. And there's so many similarities between Detroit and Cleveland, Michigan, Ohio. So like that Midwestern story where we are in a food desert where there aren't that many healthy options as you may get in New York City or in LA or Seattle, to do it here, have a healthy enterprise here in my city and where we live now is just been extraordinary. And there's so much support and we're just excited for spring to bring everyone down.
Excellent. Well, I think there may be some, I'm hearing some feedback. Okay, not anymore. I think there may be some people in the chat who are fans of college football that might say that Michigan and Ohio have big differences, not just small differences.
There are big differences, but look, we got married. We worked it out.
Hey, there you go. You're living proof.
Yeah,
so if I
go blue, go blue.
What's really great about that, yeah, Michigan and Ohio State have their thing, but you know, the thing that I love though is that I'm from Cleveland. Cleveland is huge, like we're Cleveland Brown city. And the thing that I love is that the Cleveland Browns and the Detroit Lions have no rivalry. So we're able to convert LC to also be a Browns fan, and that's what I love about the whole thing.
It's lovely.
That's amazing. So if I could take your timeline and just recap it for our audience. You let me know if I heard this correctly. So from ideation, you're passionate about fitness, but you're having a hard time finding these healthy sandwich alternatives, to experimentation, getting a catering business off the ground, getting partnerships with different gyms, and then to this sounds like a hectic event to get funding and to attract the attention of major investors that you would need to go into this implementation stage of building the brick and mortar store. Does that accurately represent the timeline of Breadless to date?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the first ideation or the text exchange that I mentioned to you where we were with the fire emojis and all that, that was back in, I think, February of 2019. Yeah. So about exactly 2 years ago. And then it was just making our own sandwiches, not offering them to anybody else. And then, you know, Ryan comes into the picture. I think I incorporated an LLC in June of 2019. And then we started, you know, I get a job that summer at Jimmy John's and selling sandwiches and gyms and et cetera. And then the fall of that year, you know, was when we did all these collaborations with Ross that LC was spearheading. And then, you know, and then obviously COVID, we know when that hit. So that was like February, March of 2020. And when we stopped, like, you know, actually selling product, et cetera. And so we haven't actually been selling product for like 10 months or so, because we've just been in mode of getting open. And, you know, because it's not just, you know, and then the money, you know, so we were fundraising basically from June of 2020 to Cal invested in September. So there was about a little over 3 months to get, but and he wasn't the first investor. He was one of the later investors to lead the round, because the first, you know, we got friends and family, et cetera, in. And so like that, from a fundraising process perspective, that could be that may not seem that long, but that process began right when we were just beta testing itself for a long time. And then actually we probably had the most incredible 3 days ever when I signed the term sheet on Thursday, the money hit the bank account on Friday, and then me and Elsie got married on Saturday. So like those days were just,
it was awesome.
Incredible. But then post September, you know, it's just been a run to try to get open. So then we've been doing everything from, you had to go through an entire branding exercise. Like right now, everything you see is not even our latest and greatest branding that's going to be coming out closer to the launch. You had to get our PR and all that organized and our messaging, and we have to go through the entire design process and the architecture process and the kitchen equipment process, and there's all these parties that are involved that are being managed in real time because there's a million decisions that need to be made, you know, down to the color of this wall over here and what poster is going to go on that wall, and so many little decisions that we're still going through, frankly, to try to just provide the best possible experience.
That's a good point, Stephen. It started February 2019. I feel like that's a short amount of time.
Yeah. I want to bring in one question from the chat before I get back to what more the mentality was like for you both during that very quick timeline. So Kyle from the chat asks, LC, what's it like What's it like balancing a full-time job with this super passionate startup?
You know, I would say it's all about prioritization and proper planning. I mean, like, as you can hear, you can sense through Mark's passion, this is a manifestation of his journey. And so he's uniquely suited to be able to lead the company, and I'm uniquely suited to be able to advance the company in my core expertise, which is branding and marketing. So before I went to get my MBA at Ross, that's where I worked in. I worked in branding, I worked in marketing, creative advertising. That's my lane. So we have a really beautiful division of roles that makes the situation work. So while Mark is the CEO and I'm working in the marketing aspect, Ryan is our chief product officer. So there's really like times that I can come in and come out where applicable. So everyone knew that I was going to be doing a full-time role at Microsoft, that I wanted to go into tech and entrepreneurship. That's why I went to Ross. And luckily I have a team that supports that. So while Mark and Ryan might handle the day-to-day, especially right now as it comes to building out the team, as he mentioned, building out the construction of the building, figuring out operations, getting staff hired and GMs and things like that, that doesn't really require my attention, but I'm always going to know what's going on since I'm married to the CEO. But as the marketing, I guess, person, I am always in the brand reviews. I'm always talking about design, thinking about the messaging and positioning. That's exactly parallel to the work that I do at Microsoft. So it's while it can be pretty busy, I feel like I have the support to be able to do my full-time job. And it's either before or after work, or on the weekends that I am able to fit in breadless. But it doesn't really feel like something that's being taken away from my career. It's actually adding to it. It's something I'm excited about. It's our baby. So it's more about like the passion and being able to do both that excites me. And I basically fill in my time where I can to be able to do both. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but
it did for me. It did for me. And just a side note, I was living with some friends in Florida when we first chatted, and they were walking through, baby steps every day, baby steps. But they were going through their own startup, and it was just so interesting to see kind of like the fire in their eyes every single day. They were pushing something new into the world. And so I'm so glad that you and Mark have been able to share that journey together and, be on the same page and drive it forward without kind of burning out, because it's a lot of work too.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful thing. And I think, like, similar to your friends, you have to have that passion. And I see that in Mark every day. I've also seen it for years because I know him very well. But for it to be a topic that is literally core to who he is, fitness, health, how can I eat well? And he's bringing that to life, not only for himself. He felt like, that target market, that target audience that was underserved. He's bringing it to people who wouldn't even have thought about it. And that's a person like me. I don't like sandwiches, and now I do. I eat bread sometimes, but I've eaten it a lot less since I've discovered that I can just change it with these leaves. So that passion is definitely there and is definitely spearheaded by Mark, and it just inspires everybody else on the team and around us. So you've got to have that for entrepreneurship.
But amazing. She is the core, because I would go crazy if she wasn't here. And
oh, that's so beautiful. Mark, question for you. I'm just formulating this question off the top of my head, so excuse me if it sounds rushed. You strike me as the type of person that runs towards challenges head on, very passionate, as Elsie says. When you're a founder, how do you balance that with the fear of the unknown?
Yeah, I mean, right now, as you say that, I'm looking at a sign on the wall that says, "Do not be afraid," is written in the Bible 365 times. That's a daily reminder to live every day fearless, right? So it's literally something that I feel like is bigger than me, and knowing that I'm the steward of it to push it. And I've been given, I think, a unique set of skills or passion and a voice, like to help make this happen. And it's a manifestation of my own journey. So I think through all of that and wanting to reach all of these people, and I see us as really having a powerful opportunity to not only like bring nutritious breadless sandwiches into neighborhoods everywhere and create a home for those who've always ordered off the menu, but I see us having really the opportunity to help democratize health and wealth in neighborhoods everywhere, because not only are we bringing healthy options into communities, but we are also going to be providing affordable ways for the communities to own, like franchises, that they can circulate that wealth in their communities while giving the community healthy options at the same time. So helping to bring true health and wealth to society members. And I see Breadless as a vehicle to help make that happen. And so that drive to fulfill a higher purpose that's way bigger than me is it says, Mark, you gotta keep moving, because these people, like, this needs to happen. And I'm just a steward, right? Like I thought I was just going to be in finance doing the investment banking, private equity thing, but here I am. If you asked me 3 years ago, would I be in Detroit building a quick service restaurant chain, I would have thought you were crazy. This is happening, and it's bigger me and beyond me.
That's incredible. What an amazing answer. And I love the concept of servant leadership, because when you start to do things because you're a steward and you're responding to a higher calling, that type of conviction influences the product, the company, the marketing. LC, I'm sure you can use that same passion to help reach a wider audience because it's such a convincing story.
Absolutely.
A question for you both. On the Breadless website, you highlight the fact that you're building the first Black-owned healthy food enterprise. I'm speaking for myself and hopefully our whole audience when I say that means a lot to us. What does that mean to you?
It's a great question. Are you going first, Mark?
Yeah, I can go. And honestly, it's related to, I think, the previous question that you asked, which I think it's actually a lot bigger than us, right? I think as the last year is highlighted for a lot of people, there's a lot of structural inequality in America. And so part of us being a Black-owned company is about helping to try to pave the pathway for future Black and diverse entrepreneurs from whatever your background is. And that's super important to us to try to create that pathway while we are building the company. And I think it extends beyond even that to, related to, I guess, the fact that we are not only are we bringing these healthy options to communities that lack access. I mean, Detroit is a very large, it's a very large contingent of Black people that lack healthy options. That was one of the main reasons we're actually launching in this city. A lot of people, I was touching on a little bit earlier saying, Mark, why aren't you taking this to California or, even Seattle or a lot of other markets? I'm like, we'll get there. But Detroiters need us now. The Midwest needs us now. And people will say, well, Midwesterners don't eat healthy. I'm like, well, Midwesterners don't have access to healthy food, right? Is it the chicken or the egg? Like, you're a product of your environment. And that is super important to us and how we think about that. And I'll give you a really quick story related to that. So when we were doing pop-ups at various gyms, I remember one time when I walked into LA Fitness, there was a note on the table from a woman named Tracy with the phone number. And the GM said, Mark, Tracy said you have to call her. I'm like, oh, shoot, what did I do? Am I in trouble? What happened? And I called Tracy and I'm like, Tracy, she's like, is this Mark from Breadless? I'm like, yes. And she's like, are you set up yet? And we're like, we're getting set up right now. Is everything okay? And she's like, yes, don't go anywhere. I'm like, okay, roger that. And so didn't go anywhere. Next thing you know, Tracy comes up and buys 2 sandwiches after we get set up. And I'm like, what just happened? And why did you come buy these sandwiches? And Tracy was telling me, I have diabetes. Doctor told me I need to eat things that lower my blood sugar, and there's nowhere to eat healthily around me. And the sandwiches were, not only tasted good, but it's something that I can eat that's healthy. So please keep doing what you're doing. And that just sort of like floored me at the time because I'm like, what kind of world do we live in where a woman worked out that day in the gym and then went home and then left a note and then drove back to the gym to buy sandwiches from this random pop-up. And that was just further inspiring me that like the people here need us now. And so that's where we can be. And, you know, a lot of people may think of it as a risk to that the Midwest doesn't eat healthy, et cetera. But we feel that this is where we're supposed to be, and we'll get to all those other places. And that all ties into us being a Black-owned healthy food enterprise. And because we truly are, you know, not only trying to pave the way, but also build the community up, build the health and wealth of the communities in which we serve.
That's amazing. I definitely get the sense that there's a confluence of your personality, a very distinct product, and a big need in the local community. So I'm so glad that you're able to make that happen.
Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
And if I could just touch on that a bit about the aspect of being Black owned or Black co-founders. I think we all know, or if anyone has, you know, looked into VC or entrepreneurship, the percentage of ownership or Black individuals getting investment or having enterprises is very, very, very low. So to Mark's point, I think it's really important, especially in a city like Detroit, and we begin to franchise elsewhere, that it is, you know, known that Black people can do this. Anybody can do this. Healthy food and these ideas are for everyone. So I think it's important to not only, you know, everything that Mark said, but also to show our faces, to be able to say, and for people to know, this is Black owned, this is quality, this is Black owned, and it's for everybody, and you can do it too. So I really think that aspect is important. And I think it's going to be important, especially for launching in Detroit. As I mentioned, born and raised from downtown. And, you know, my family, we love to go out and eat and go do things and go to plays and things like that. But a lot of the businesses that come down here that are, you know, putting money into Detroit and the entities, they aren't people that look like the majority of the community in Detroit, and it's a majority Black city. So I think it's going to be even more exciting for Black people in the community to see that, wow, there are people that look like me who started something that is bringing something that's healthy and positive, that will bring all kinds of people to this restaurant. So for me, that's why it's important to really articulate and be proud that, you know, we are a Black healthy enterprise.
Setting a great example.
Thank you.
I also want to touch quickly, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my voice. There we go. I also want to touch quickly that same ethos is reflected in the product. I was reading an interesting article about how Chef Ryan was choosing the type of greens that would go into the sandwiches, and about how the chard, the mustard greens, the kales are reflective of, you know, what grows naturally in the African diaspora. So can you tell me a little bit more about how your choice of ingredients reflects that food culture?
Yeah, so I'm so glad that you read that article. That was also illuminating for Mark and I when we were working with Ryan. He's so creative in terms of, you know, his culinary expertise. And, you know, he does talk about in that article, if you weren't able to read it, that, you know, a lot of the Caribbean Africans, the African Americans, especially in the South, there are greens that are core to those cultures, such as collard green. That's very popular. If you think about soul food, African American soul food, you know, you've got the mac and cheese, fried chicken, and collard greens. But collard green is actually something that is a really healthy leaf, and there's so much that you can do with it. Has a great taste profile. It's thick, it's durable. So I think he was very creative in trying to infuse the African diaspora in that way. And then also with turnip greens and Swiss chard, you know, these are leaves that are found everywhere, but a lot of people in the Caribbean who also have a lot of, you know, Black people, if you didn't know, in the islands, that really, you know, being able to bring that in and then match the taste profiles with those leaves, I think he was super creative in that aspect. And that was something that we learned from him after he already, you know, created the chef-inspired taste profiles for the sandwiches. And I was pretty blown away. I think, Mark, you were too. So, yeah.
Yeah, we both are in the process of reading that article and going through that process as well.
Well, yeah, I know who else was blown away. Your customer at the gym, who must have had the chicken and chard sandwich because she was hooked. She was
Oh, yeah.
absolutely hooked. Let me check the chat real quick and see if we have any outstanding questions.
There's one from Jane.
Yeah, I can read Jane's question real quick. How do you think about creating high quality and healthier food, which is, we're assuming, to be more expensive? Let me rephrase it. I'm sorry, Jane. I'm going to try to rephrase it. How do you balance creating high quality and healthier food, but also the accessibility of it being at a higher price point?
So this is about sourcing the healthy ingredients?
Yeah, I think more trying to balance, like, you want to bring healthier food to people, but you also want to do it at a price point that's accessible. And sometimes those tensions can conflict.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, right? And it's something that we're very mindful of, and you have to think about all of your processes and how all of those processes can ultimately get reflected in your prices as well, right? So, I mean, we are utilizing a really small footprint, and that's why we're working on also producing a very simple menu, right? All our Papos and catering, we only had 3 sandwiches, and even when we launched, we're launching with 6 sandwiches. Which is still a very small menu, and our core side is air fried rutabaga fries, and we have our own custom in-house blended beverage as well, but we'll have third-party bottled beverages also. So we're getting a very simplified menu that helps create more simplified processes and a more simplified supply chain, which help keep prices like reasonable, right? But you know, we want to use the freshest, like, local greens and freshest products, and it's quick service, but it is high quality, and quality, you know, there is a premium with high quality, but we're doing everything we can to keep costs down at the same time with our processes. And so it's sort of a symbiotic effort. And the way I think about it is, you can go get a salad, you know, if you just get a salad by itself, in a lot of places, you could pay $14 to $18, right? Or you could also, you know, you can get an entire meal at Breadless with a sandwich, fries, and a drink, all healthy, all low carb, for less than that.
Excellent. And Janet, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. So I was hoping to hear from you both. You've touched on this a bit, but how did your MBA education specifically help you with either starting or growing your company? And when you think back on your time now, knowing what you know, what classes or skills did you gain through the degree that you rely on most?
Thanks for that question. I can start. For me, it wasn't really a class. I was a fellow for the Zuul Commercialization Fund, the VC fund at Ross, and that really focuses on early stage investing. So for me, I really wanted to join that VC club because I felt like I would have an opportunity, as someone who wants to be an entrepreneur, what I thought would be more long term. I wanted to understand the investing decisions behind, what makes a VC or an angel investor want to invest in an entrepreneur. So for me, going through due diligence processes and looking at different early stage companies, evaluating their team, their, market size, their, all of the elements, their financial models, and all of the elements that really makes for a good business plan, and looking at their products and testing them out and asking entrepreneurs questions throughout the process of being on the fund is really what educated me. And it was something that when I was in the fund, that's when Mark, talked about the idea for Breadless, and I was able to use resources that I was afforded to, PitchBook, because I had access as a student at University of Michigan, and also through the fund, and start doing market sizing. I didn't know about market sizing and how to look into that, to see that, 17% of the US population were low carb, no carb, celiac, or, couldn't eat bread and things like that. But I was able to use those resources by having that opportunity to be on the VC fund, which really helped me understand this. So I would say, in terms of my MBA education, it was really all of that. I guess you could call it action-based learning in the VC fund, and really being able to apply that to the endeavor, Breadless, as it was happening.
I guess to add to that, I feel like I had 2 MBAs, which I had the benefit of. So little cheat codes there. But I think my MBA program, I mean, this is actually my second startup. The first one where I'm sort of running it as CEO, but second startup. And I think I used business school to take every possible startup class imaginable, and every single pitch competition imaginable, and just tried to met every single person in the school to know like what I was trying to do and how to get connected to resources, because I've been a huge beneficiary of serendipity. And, you know, just the random person you met at that random function, you know, in events just like this have manifested themselves in amazing ways. And business school is really a playground for all of that. And so in Ross, right, like when I was there as a partner, it was very much the same thing. We met incredible people and who have been massively beneficial. I mean, that's culminating in just, for example, this session that we're having right here today, right now, right, through relationships that manifest themselves serendipitously through school. And so, and I would say even further, our first investors for Breadless were my classmates from business school. As well, right? Like that was all, and and to some extent it was about the business, but even more so than it being about the business, I think it was because of our relationship. And they just believed in, you know, they're putting their faith in me ultimately to make this happen. Yes, obviously I gave them a pitch deck and a business model and all those things. Those are just check the box items. But that wasn't the main reason why I think they invested. Like, yeah, they believe in the product and all that, but it was more about them trusting me. So that was a huge beneficiary from business school. And of course, everything is about momentum, right? So just getting them in, and even the branding firm that we worked with, that came through the friend from business school who invested as well. And the lead investor, right, came through a relationship that I got because of another friend in business school. So there's just so many tangentials that relate back to, I would say, whatever you want to do, I would just encourage you to try to embody it and communicate it, because you can't benefit from serendipity if you don't let people know what you're doing, right? Whether that's consulting, investment banking, private equity, food and beverage, consumer, whatever it is, if you just tell people what you're trying to do, and you start to amazing things start to happen. And that was the culmination of my personal experience.
Yeah, and Janet, just, you know, everything that Mark just said, but also just to reiterate, you asked about skills, and that the skill of networking, like Mark is talking about, and just I used every opportunity to talk about Breadless. I would be at the bus, you know, on top of it, dancing and like talking about Breadless, and then I would be at Rick's or Skeeps, anywhere. I could be doing anything, and I would use that opportunity, like, have you had Breadless yet? Or, oh, like, let me send this email to my friends who are on boards with me at Ross and see if they want some Breadless. It's just, I think the skill is not necessarily tied to a classroom, but the MBA environment fosters that networking, not fosters that self, you know, just like, what do you call it? It fosters you to be an evangelist for your product or your business. And you should definitely do that. I mean, this is a 2 years, you won't get back out of your life. It would behoove you to talk about this to everyone as you know, throughout your process or whatever you're doing. And I think, to Mark's point, all those people that are supportive of Ross, we're supportive of Breadless, were people at Ross, HBS, family, friends. So be an evangelist. So that's a skill set that I'm not sure is taught in the classroom, but it's something I would definitely encourage.
I'll echo a couple other. I'll echo and echo. A few other incremental points there related to skill sets. Just, you know, I came from a background in finance, right? I had a private equity and investment banking background. I had invested in some startups before, so I knew a little bit about how like the finance and the fundraising and all that worked. But if you don't have that specific background, I do think that having some investment in understanding finance and understanding, if you were interested in early stage company things, early stage cap table math, and like we had a course called called, you're basically financing for startups, et cetera, which was all about kind of cap table math and fundraising and dilution and just understanding valuation, like a core DCF, we're talking about like revenue growth, margins, capital intensity, like just understanding some of those basic fundamentals of finance, I think will be very helpful towards just being able to dissect and understand your business and the profile of it. And those are hard skill sets that I think are helpful, as well as just purely sort of like lean startup methodology and the concepts of just getting something out there and having feedback loops as well are skill sets. As LC was saying, communication. If there are any, I would encourage any opportunities there are to just do any type of speaking or pitching. It takes practice to learn how to put together a mini pitch deck or presentation, et cetera. And the best way to learn those things is just to do it. So in business school is a massive playground for all those things. So even though it's going to feel very uncomfortable and maybe difficult, it is a skill set that you need to develop.
And I wish that business school had sales courses. Mark is an expert salesman. He reads a lot of books about that. So that's another skill outside of the classroom that is really important, which I see him exhibit every day. So definitely need to know how to do sales and sell your product or business.
Yeah, we had a course called Entrepreneurial Sales and Marketing, and a professor was commenting on that the most valuable skill set probably that's out there is sales, but all of schools and institutions aren't set up to teach you sales. So you have to learn it yourself. So I'm like, interesting. I should probably start exploring this. And so, yeah, then started listening to sales podcasts and reading books, et cetera, because there are real ways to improve how to think about things. And really what sales is about is also just improving your communication at the end of the day and telling a story in a way that properly conveys what you're trying to convey. And so, I think that there's unlimited learning to be done there. But, that was certainly something that, yeah, I've been investing in.
So to follow up, as somebody that's about to graduate with an MBA and does not have formal sales classes, do you have any recommendations for books or resources to start out on?
Well, I guess the question is to be an entrepreneur for what specifically, because I guess that depends on what you're trying to do.
I guess so. I was just wondering if you had any general recommendations for good materials you've come across.
For sales?
Yeah.
Oh, for sales specifically. Well, my favorite book, period, or my favorite podcast I've ever listened to is How I Built This. I've probably listened to every single How I Built This by Guy Raz that exists. And then there's also a sales influence podcast. There's Kwame Christian has a good Negotiate Anything podcast. There's so many sales books out there. I'm trying to think of what other books that
He's looking in his office because he has the time.
I'm looking behind me, like what books that I have over here.
But yeah, How I Built This
More
is
faster.
something.
But from podcasts, the main podcasts I listen to are How I Built This, and then there's a Sales Influence podcast, there's the Negotiate Anything podcast, and a Negotiations Ninja podcast. And all these things are really helpful because in the business world, you'll realize that every single thing is a negotiation at the end of the day. And so if there's one class that you may or may, that if you still have an opportunity at Ross or wherever you're in school to take a negotiations class, I highly encourage it, because you're going to find yourself like in every single interaction with any other party, there's some form of negotiation. And I think it's important to think about it, because the more confident you get understanding it, the more you realize that you can create more win-win scenarios. I think when people don't know how to negotiate is actually when it gets worse for everybody, because then it can feel more like take it or leave it, when it's like, no, we're trying to create a solution for the both of us. But if somebody is utilizing, aggressive tactics, then that's not helpful. So the more everybody knows, the better. I think you increase the size of the pie for everyone.
Totally agree. I did forget that I did take negotiations at Ross, and it was helpful with not negotiating my Microsoft offer, but just being able to be more comfortable speaking and trying to add value to the other party and to yourself, to Mark's point.
Amazing. dropping some knowledge here as some of us are about to graduate. We have 5 more minutes left, so I would like to end with a question in the chat. I believe it was Kyle. Oh, sorry about that. I believe it was Kyle who's asking how you guys approach local sustainable sourcing.
Yeah, I mean, so to be honestly, I know my wheelhouse, and that's Ryan's wheelhouse as Chief Product Officer. And so he's going to give you he would give you the much better answer than I will. But the thought process around that is the Midwest ecosystem is highly robust. The supply chain in the Midwest is very robust. Ryan has been here in Detroit with a very successful catering business for many, many years. So he has deep relationships with a lot of these local farmers, et cetera. And he's using those in Food Lab and Keep Growing Detroit and all these organizations. He's tapping into them to help us with our sourcing on that front, because it is very important to us to have that local focus. But if I say anything more than that, I'm not credible.
I'm looking at the question that Kyle had, and yep, exactly what Mark mentioned to answer the question. Yep, we're working with the local network, urban farming. I know Ryan, like Mark said, he's looking into all of these resources and making connections, and has been as we speak. So we definitely want the feel of local and supporting farmers and supporting those sourcing relationships. So on the same page with that.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to ask one more question to wrap us up. Let's say that I want to start my own business. What would your advice be to me?
My advice is to be scrappy. Like, you need to just get out there. You know, if you have an idea, take a class or pitch it to someone. You know, just try it out. And I have so many classmates from, you know, class of 2020 that, you know, they may have been afraid to try an idea, or they think they need to have everything buttoned up. They need to have their business plan. They need to know the financial projections. They need to, you know, get their right, you know, manufacturing, like all of these different things they think they have to do before they get started. All of that will get in your way. Like, of course, you will need to have that eventually. But if you want to try something out, get out there, beta test, try it out, be scrappy, you know, wake up early, leverage your friends, tell your family, like, you just need to do it. The hardest thing to do in entrepreneurship is to just start. So I would just say be scrappy and get started right away.
Yeah, to build on what LC is saying, it all comes down to your customers at the end of the day. So just getting something in front of customers and not being afraid of their reaction which can be scary at times, I get it, is something that you have to do. The other thing I would just ask you immediately, though, is why do you want to start the company? Both in terms of just being an entrepreneur in general. I would not recommend it for a lot of people. Not everybody is necessarily, it's not for everyone, right? With a lot of industries, maybe or not for necessarily for everyone, but entrepreneurship specifically is something that requires a certain patience and perseverance that, you know, you may or may not actually be cut out for, even if you think that you are. So just challenge that. But also, what is the reason behind the specific idea that you want to focus on? Because as Stephen, you were mentioning as well, like there's inevitable constant walls being put in front of you. And if you don't care enough to get your hands bloody punching through those walls, then you're not going to get through the wall. And therefore, if you don't have a strong enough why, it's not going to matter. But also, what LC was saying, just get it in front of people as fast as possible in the cheapest way possible, which for us was just calling local gyms and and even if they didn't say yes, showing up anyways and making sure and finding a way to get set up and just to get something in front of customers in the cheapest way possible, and then iterating on their feedback.
That's amazing. Be scrappy and have a strong why. Get your hands bloody punching through walls. I love it. I love it. We do have one more question and 2 minutes to go. So let's try to answer this quickly. Nikki asks, how did you think about your cap table when building the company?
Oh, Nikki, Nikki, what's up?
Hey guys, good to see you. I have the bonnet on.
I see you right now, but I hear you. Well, great to connect here. So how do we think about building the cap table when building the company, right? I think it's a multifaceted question, right? Because ultimately we know that we're trying to scale. We also need a certain amount of money, and ideally you want to limit as much dilution as possible. And so we thought about either just starting with debt funding. We ultimately then realized that we would be under a lot more pressure to have cash flow much faster with debt funding than with equity funding. And we realized that a lot of benefits that come with equity partners that can help you to get resources and connections to help you really scale and can think in that growth mentality. And then at the end of the day, it comes down to some extent, negotiation and supply and demand, right? And that was thinking about, well, what's fair and what is the market rate for what we're trying to do? So it was trying to do diligence on what are other QSR concepts or restaurant concepts that are launching, like how much capital did they raise for their first rounds? What were the valuations for theirs? And so the first things I started to do were figure out what classmates of mine had done something similar and call them and ask them, like, what did their cap table look like? And to get benchmarks, right? It was about benchmarking and understanding that, and then fitting it within our context, and also looking at the person who's going to be investing, how much value do I think this person is going to bring to the table as well, right? And I was thinking, like, our lead investor, Al Vapori, he seed funded Sweet Green, Warby Parker, and Allbirds. I'm like, so this guy knows some stuff. And I think he can add some value. He even connected us with the Sweet Green founders. I had multiple conversations with Sweet Green founders, like on the phone, right? That was a valuable conversation. Like there's resources that he brings to the table. So I was willing to give up probably a little bit more to him than I would have been willing to give up to the no-name investor who was just writing me a check and not any incremental value, right? So there's a lot of factors that come into play. It started with benchmarking and knowing, like, what is the market rate, and then saying, okay, if that's the market rate for any old investor, if the investor's gonna add a little more value, maybe that their value is worth something, and you have to properly take that into account. Because the way I think about it, at the end of the day, like, I'd rather have slightly less of something that becomes really big and changes the lives of millions than more of something that doesn't do anything. And so you take all that into consideration as well. So, but then at the end of the day, it comes down to supply and demand and negotiation and modeling out multiple rounds as well to understand, like 5 years from now, like, what does that mean from a dilution perspective? And so you take all of that in consideration, try to make the best decision possible, like in real time based upon supply and demand dynamics.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course. And we definitely have to catch up.
No, for sure.
All right, Mark, thank you so much for giving us some of your time today. We might have lost LC already, but please pass along. Oh, good, good. I thought you left us.
No, I knew it was 3 p.m., so I wanted to tell everyone thank you.
Okay. Whew, you scared me there. Gave me a shock. Well, thank you so much, both of you. And on behalf of the entire FoodBev Club at the University of Michigan and all of our friends that joined today, thank you so much. And we look forward to getting our first breadless sandwich sometime soon.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you all so much.
For everyone here. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
All right. Excellent.
Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.